Chapter 1168. In the sky above Shenzhen, the purplish-black blood clouds grew larger and larger. The sorrow in everyone's hearts grew stronger and stronger. This was because too many sages had fallen. When more than half of the sages had fallen, some sages finally woke up from the illusion. However, it was useless even if they woke up. Most of them were already severely injured. Therefore, even if they woke up, they were still killed. The sages roared and began to unleash their full power. Although the sages on Shenzhen's side were powerful, and there were even thousands of them against one sage. However, when the sages unleashed their full power, they still couldn't suppress them. Finally, the first sage was successfully pulled up by the Holy Realm after unleashing his full power. He escaped from the God Realm and avoided being killed. This sage was furious and wanted to kill everyone on Shenzhen's side. However, he couldn't do it. There were too many experts on Shenzhen's side. He could only use his strength to resist those attacks. Otherwise, he would be killed in the process of being pulled up. After all, he was severely injured and couldn't unleash his full power at all. With the first, there was a second. One after another, sages ascended to the God Realm. 5. Hundreds of sages were killed by Shenzhen's experts in one round. Only 5 escaped with their lives. The others were all killed. Close to 100 sages were killed. Once this news spread, it wouldn't just shock the God Realm. Even the Holy Realm would be shocked because of this. In fact, Murong Yu and the others already knew why the humans of the Holy Realm were furious. Because Murong Yu didn't just kill dozens of sages. He also gave the humans of the Holy Realm a resounding slap in the face. If they didn't care about anything, then more sages would descend to the God Realm. They wouldn't give up until they destroyed Shenzhen. However, Murong Yu also lost some cards. One of them was the Heart of Illusion. This thing could even make Lu Haotsong, who was in the Eternal Realm, hallucinate, let alone others. Moreover, a sage had to pay a huge price to descend. The stronger the person, the higher the price. Murong Yu really didn't believe that they would send an imperishable stage expert down. Whoosh! Swish when Hong and the others appeared far away from the sacred mountain. They only saw the last ascended saint disappear high in the sky. How could there be any saints on the ground? What terrified them the most was that Shenzhen's experts were crazily attacking the experts of the 4 academies. These people were far weaker than the saints. Furthermore, he was quite a distance away from those sages. Therefore, there was no power to attack them. Therefore, even after Shenzhen's experts had killed almost all of the saints, they were still immersed in the illusion and were unaware of it. These people were not strong, so there was no need for over 100 people to work together to kill them. As long as a few people attacked together, these experts would quickly fall. When Shenzhen's experts attacked with all their might, the quasi-saint experts of the 4 great academies fell like weeds. Seeing this scene, Hong and the others in the distance were so angry that they almost fainted. However, they didn't dare to come closer. Although they couldn't see through the illusion, seeing those saints and quasi-saint experts being killed without moving, even if they were stupid, they could sense that something was wrong. What kind of demonic technique is this? Hong and the others frowned, their faces filled with fear. They couldn't imagine what kind of technique could make Shenzhen's ants kill over 100 saints. While Hong and the others were pondering, Shenzhen's experts had already killed all the experts of the 4 great academies within the illusion. At this point, over 100 saints and thousands of quasi-saint level experts had been completely wiped out. Not a single one was left alive. The blood clouds in the sky gradually dissipated, and the world returned to normal. However, the thick smell of blood spread far and wide. It was pungent and unpleasant. Shock! Shock! In the distance, countless people could only look at Shenzhen's side in shock. Many people had been watching from the beginning until now. They only saw those so-called saints stretching out their necks to be killed without any resistance. What's going on? What kind of witchcraft did Shenzhen use? Everyone was puzzled. While they were puzzled, they also felt fear. Even the saints aren't Shenzhen's match. Shenzhen is really too scary. We must not make enemies with them in the future. How can Shenzhen be so powerful? Could it be that there's a saint behind them? Was it a saint who attacked just now? No matter what, the battle between Shenzhen and the Saints is inevitable. It's best if we don't get involved. Otherwise, we'll be the unlucky ones caught in the middle. Various thoughts appeared in their minds. However, all of them were terrified of Shenzhen. At this moment, a large number of people began to retreat. They were afraid that Shenzhen would kill them because he didn't like them. However, Muronyu obviously didn't care about them. At this moment, Muronyu was floating in the sky, coldly looking at Hong and the others in front of him. In addition to the deans of the 4 great academies, there was also the palace master of the Celestial Palace and the demon race's saint who had just arrived. On the other hand, the Glory Sect experts stood outside of Muronyu, each of them looking at Hong and the others with mocking expressions. They seemed to be mocking them in their hearts. Everyone, it's a pity that you're late. Otherwise, we could have sent you on your way together, Muronyu suddenly said with a smile on his face. Ha ha ha, Shenzhen's people laughed loudly, but Hong and the others' expressions became increasingly gloomy. Endless killing intent emanated from their bodies, extremely terrifying. Hong, how about it? Are you interested in fighting with me? Let's see if I, a heavenly venerable, am a match for you, a saint? Oh no, your true body isn't in the god realm. This is just a puppet you control, right? If you dare to come over, I'll directly kill you. Muronyu was provoking Hong. Moreover, it was naked contempt. Most importantly, Hong really didn't dare to fight with Muronyu. Even those true saints were killed. His puppet was even less of a match for Muronyu. The so-called saints are nothing more than this. You still want to act like a tyrant in the god realm? Hurry up and go back to your sacred world. Murong Xian stepped forward, his expression indifferent as he glanced at Hong and the others with disdain. Hong and the others felt that their chests were about to explode from anger. A dignified great saint expert was actually disdained and scolded by 2 ants in their eyes. This was the biggest insult they had ever received in their lives. What? None of you so-called saints dare to come out and fight. No one dares to come out and fight. Murong Xian looked at Hong and the others with disdain, extremely arrogant. Hong and the others all wanted to kill Muronyu and the others. However, they didn't dare to do so. They were all scared stiff. You don't even dare to fight. All of you go back to the sacred world. This isn't your world. Someone from Shenzhen couldn't help but shout. Go back. Go back. Shenzhen and the others roared in unison, their voices shaking the heavens. What should we do? Man's face was gloomy as he came to Hong's side with a murderous aura. He suppressed the anger in his heart and said in a deep voice, maybe the saint behind them made a move. If that's the case, if we attack, we might be killed by them, Hong said with a very ugly expression. Are we just going to let them be so arrogant? Tiansha's killing intent surged as he spoke. His killing intent continued to surge out from his body, bombarding the void around his body and shattering it. One could imagine how strong his murderous aura was. Let's go back first. We'll discuss with the people above and think of a countermeasure. Hong glanced at Muronyu and the others with a gloomy expression. Then, he turned around and left. Man and the others glared at Muronyu with resentful eyes, then rose into the sky and left Shenzhen. Trash, you actually ran away without a fight. You're a disgrace to the saints. Shenzhen's people mocked Hong and the others, constantly drawing hatred. Murong Xian was a little unhappy. His figure flashed, and he wanted to chase after them. However, he was stopped by Muronyu. Although you can kill them, Hong and the others are great saints. They are much stronger than ordinary saints. If you force them into a corner and they unleash their saint aura, you won't be a match for them at all, Muronyu said in a deep voice. Murong Xian took a deep breath, then nodded, holding back his murderous intent towards Hong and the others. Holy Lord, what should we do now? After killing so many saints, we've already formed a grudge with the humans of the sacred world. I believe they won't let us go. Wenling walked up and asked, if 1 comes, we'll kill 1. If 2 come, we'll kill 2. If they dare to come, we'll dare to kill them, a quasi-saint said with murderous intent. Let's go back first. Muronyu flew back into Shenzhen first. Unlike the others who were so optimistic, Murongyu's heart was very heavy. although the Heart of Illusion could even hallucinate undead realm experts. However, they had to be within the range of the Heart of Illusion's influence. If those experts didn't come close, but unleashed their saint aura from afar, then slapped the sacred mountain, no matter how powerful the Heart of Illusion was, it wouldn't be able to block those people's attacks. At that time, the sacred mountain might be destroyed. Now that we've temporarily intimidated those saints, they won't dare to make a move before they know the details. I have to take this opportunity to raise my strength to the quasi-saint realm as much as possible. At the same time, I have to make all kinds of preparations. If the saints attack and I don't unify the heaven realm, then I can only evacuate all of Shangzhen's people to the desolate world, Moronyu muttered in his heart. Strength. It was still because he wasn't strong enough. Otherwise, if he was strong enough, whether it was humans or demons of the sacred world, as long as they dared to come down, Moronyu would be able to kill them with one punch. On the other side, the furious Hong and the others had already reported this matter. How would the sacred world respond? Would they immediately send experts to kill Shangzhen and Moronyu? Chapter 1169. Sacred World, Human Race, in a certain hall. Hong and the others, as well as the few lucky ones who managed to escape back to the sacred world, were all in the hall. Apart from them, there were many other experts in the hall. Of course, these experts were only relative to them. The top sages of the sacred world were not qualified to be in the same hall, even if it was a trial. Sages, great sages. Hee, you guys have really brought honor to our sacred world. Dozens of sages were actually killed by a mere sect from the god realm. Trash like you, what use do we have for you? A middle-aged man sat on the main seat in the hall. At this moment, his entire body was emitting a cold aura. His eyes were like a sharp divine weapon that constantly swept past Hong and the others. Hong and the others looked at the floor with a solemn expression. They did not dare to come into contact with the middle-aged man. This time, they had failed the mission, and dozens of saints had been killed by the enemy. The demon race mocked them for being useless. No matter what the situation was, they deserved to die. After all, they were only ordinary sages and great sages. Of course, for them to be able to get the mission to the god realm, there must be someone behind them. Otherwise, how could it be their turn? If not, those who escaped back to the sacred world would have been killed long ago. Speak, what's going on? The middle-aged man looked at the nervous saints with an indifferent expression as a cold glint flashed in his eyes. The sages who escaped back to the sacred world looked at each other. Then, one of them said in a deep voice, I feel like we entered an illusion back then. Then, he described the situation in detail. Hearing this person's words, Hong and the others were soaked in cold sweat. That illusion made these sages enter an illusion without them knowing. Although they were great sages, they were much stronger than sages. But who knew if that illusion would have any effect on them? If they had rashly approached the sacred mountain back then, Hong and the others looked at each other with lingering fear. They secretly rejoiced that they did not approach it back then. Otherwise, they might not have been here today. Illusion? Everyone in the hall fell silent. Saints weren't the strongest. Even those above the imperishable realm could die. The sacred world was filled with all kinds of danger zones that could take their lives. The illusions in some places could also confuse saints with extremely high realms. However, that was all in the saints' world. How could such a powerful illusion appear in the god world? Did you make it up to avoid punishment? The middle-aged man's eyes flashed with a cold light as he suddenly shouted. The sages were shocked, and their faces turned pale. What we're saying is the truth, another saint said with a slightly frightened voice. If they were accused of such a crime, they would definitely die. Whether it's true or not, I will investigate it myself, the middle-aged man said in a low voice. At the same time, his eyes suddenly shot out two beams of astonished divine light. Whoosh! The divine light directly tore through the void and acted on the bodies of those sages. The saints were terrified, thinking that the middle-aged man was going to kill them. However, they did not dare to resist, nor could they resist. That was because when the divine light shone on them, they were suppressed. Is that true? When the middle-aged man read the memories of these sages, he immediately frowned. At the same time, the other experts also began to read the memories of these sages. Then, everyone's face turned gloomy. Did the saint behind Murong, you make a move? A saint suddenly said with a gloomy face. That's possible. Otherwise, there would not be such a powerful illusion in the God world. These people might not have entered the illusion, but they were fooled by the saint, an expert said with a gloomy face. They determined that the person behind Murong Yu was an advanced saint. If he wanted to make a move, these ordinary sages would not even know that they had been tricked. Only someone at that level could wipe them all out. He actually made a move? He's going against the entire human race. Could he really be an expert of the sacred clan? Everyone was extremely gloomy. In fact, they were all wrong. Lu Haozong did not make a move at all. Moreover, Lu Haozong was a human from the God world and had nothing to do with the sacred clan. An advanced saint. Why don't we send a high-level saint down there and kill him? One of the saints said angrily, his killing intent overflowing. That's not practical. Firstly, we don't know where he's hiding. Moreover, we don't know what realm he's in. Most importantly, the price for an advanced saint to come down is too high. Once he's unable to kill the other party in one blow, he'll lose his chance. Someone immediately rejected this suggestion. This won't do, that won't do. Why don't we send out an army of sages to wipe out Murong Yu and the so-called Shenzhen? Someone was angry. Let's discuss this with the Goblin clan first. This is a matter between our two clans. The middle-aged man muttered and finally ordered the experts in the hall to retreat. God world. After this battle with Shenzhen, Shenzhen's name shook the entire God world and became the strongest force in the God world. There was no need for Shenzhen to say anything, and many forces took the initiative to submit to Shenzhen, wanting to become Shenzhen's ally. Regarding this, Murong Yu naturally did not reject anyone. Anyone who came would form an alliance with him. Therefore, in a short period of time, Shenzhen's strength skyrocketed. At this time, there was almost no one left in the Sun Wilderness mainland. This was because Murong Yu had repeatedly emphasized the saint's conspiracy when he was accepting the various alliance masters. Moreover, many people realized that ever since the population of the Sun Wilderness mainland decreased, the murderous aura gradually decreased. Many people knew that Murong Yu was telling the truth. Otherwise, why would they be so bored as to fight against the saint? However, although most of the people had left the Sun Wilderness mainland, many people did not get close to Shenzhen. They were still observing. After all, although Murong Yu was powerful, he was only a god and their enemy was a saint. The saint would definitely not let this matter rest. If they wanted to revive Huang, the first thing they had to do was kill Murong Yu and Shenzhen. However, after a long time, there was no movement in the holy world. There were no more people descending to the mortal world. Could it be that the saint had given up on the god realm, just like that? Gave up on reviving Huang? If they gave up, it would definitely be a good thing for the entire god realm. But no one thought that they had really given up. Right now, it was just the calm before the storm, in a chaotic secret ground. The reason why they haven't made a move now is probably because they are worried about me. Once they find out my identity, they will immediately make a move. Lu Haozong said indifferently. In the holy world, although the human race was the weaker side, their forces were also very powerful. Even so, they were still extremely powerful. It will be difficult to investigate Lu Haozong, but they would definitely be able to. It was just a matter of time. If that's the case, then I'll break through to the quasi-saint realm before they find out your identity. The matter was urgent, and Murong Yu did not have enough time. Even if you break through to the quasi-saint realm, it's useless. Even if you unify the entire god realm, it will be difficult for you to fight against the humans of the holy world. Lu Haozong shook his head. The strength of the human race was beyond Murong Yu's imagination. How could a mere god realm fight against them? So what if I can't fight them? I will definitely not watch them revive Huang and destroy the god realm. Murong Yu's eyes flashed coldly. It was not his character to retreat in the face of difficulties. Even if he knew that he was no match for them, he would still face them head-on. Even if he failed in the end, he would have done his best. With a flash, Murong-Yu returned to the Holy Mountain. Little Xian, you have obtained the Eastern Wilderness inheritance. Can you sense the other desolates' inner worlds or their consciousness? If you can, try your best to sense them. We're going to exterminate every last one of the desolates. Murong-Yu indifferently said, his eyes filled with cold, killing intent. Murong-Xian nodded fiercely. I'll try my best. After giving a few instructions, Murong-Yu returned to the chaotic secret zone. Old Lu, pay close attention to the God Realm. If anyone comes down from above, you must inform me immediately. I'll go cultivate first. Before Lu Haotsong could react, Murong-Yu had already disappeared from the hall. This bastard. Lu Haotsong shook his head helplessly. However, he still began to pay attention to the God Realm. Time passed slowly. Year after year passed. After the incident of Shenzhen killing a saint, no more saints came down. At this time, there was no one left on the Sun Wilderness mainland. The God Realm also quieted down again. However, under the silence, there was a turbulent undercurrent. In Shenzhen, everyone was cultivating with all their might. Because of Murong-Xian, he could enter and exit the Eastern Wilderness at will and obtain large amounts of blood crystals. With the help of these blood crystals, everyone's physical bodies were improving rapidly. Especially because of the increase in their comprehension, their realms were also increasing rapidly. Originally, there were not many people in Shenzhen who could reach the Heavenly Venerate realm other than the members of the battle team. However, at this time, Heavenly Venerate realm experts were popping up like bamboo shoots after the rain. Other than Shenzhen, Shenzhen's allies and forces that were closer to Shenzhen also began to obtain large amounts of blood crystals and rapidly improve their strength. Murong-Yu, who was cultivating in the chaotic secret zone, had also reached the limit of a Heavenly Venerate. Moreover, he felt that he had already stepped into the quasi-saint realm. It was just that this step had not been completely taken yet. On this day, in the sky above the primeval college of the Eldritch Wilderness mainland, accompanied by a loud bang that shook the entire heaven and earth, a huge black hole appeared out of thin air. While the God Realm was still in shock and bewilderment, one figure after another shot down from the black hole. All of them had surging vital energy and aura. Saints. Chapter 1170. One figure after another shot out of the black hole and quickly flew towards Primeval College. Terrifying auras continued to erupt, shaking the heavens and the earth with great momentum. These were all sages. The army of sages had finally arrived. That black hole should be the passage opened by the sages. In just a few breaths, thousands of sages had shot out of the black hole. More and more people rushed out from the tunnel. For a moment, the entire holy realm was shaken. Shenzhen also received the news immediately and immediately activated the Heart of Illusion and various formations. Countless experts who were outside hurried back. They all knew that a great battle was coming. Hundreds of thousands of sages gathered in Primeval College. Although they hadn't done anything yet, they had already shocked the entire heavenly realm. Unparalleled holy aura burst out in all directions and shot straight to the sky. In the end, all the students of Primeval College left Primeval College. They couldn't stay there any longer. Although those people had suppressed their cultivation, they still exuded holy aura faintly. One or two people were fine, but hundreds of thousands of them together. How could the students of Primeval College resist? Not to mention the students, even the classroom doors of Primeval College couldn't resist and left one after another. In the end, there was no one else in Primeval College except for those sages. This was an extremely bad situation. But why would those sages care about this? They had a big plan. This time, in addition to eliminating Murong-Yu and Shenzhen, they had another big thing to do. Have they finally come down? The moment the spatial passage appeared, Lu Haotsong, who was in the main hall of the chaotic secret plane, suddenly opened his eyes. A cold light flashed in the depths of his eyes. Then his eyes seemed to see through the void and rushed towards Murong-Yu through countless time and space. At this moment, Murong Yu had entered a mysterious state. Even after countless years of meditation, he still had no clue about the seventh level of the primal chaos celestial body record. However, Murong Yu's realm had increased quite a bit. This made him realize that he could break through to the quasi-saint realm when he reached the sixth level of the chaotic celestial body record. Quasi-saint was included in the sixth level of the chaotic celestial records. In fact, whether it was a quasi-god or a quasi-saint, this realm did not exist. It was just a transitional realm between immortals and gods, and between gods and saints. Strictly speaking, he could only be considered a celestial venerable. At this moment, Murong Yu was in a state of breakthrough. This kid is in a delicate state. If we disturb him, he might fail to break through. Forget it. Let's wait for a while. Lu Haotsong pondered. In the end, he did not immediately tell Murong Yu. In the main hall of Primeval College, a group of dozens of experts had gathered here. The deans of the four great academies of the human continent, Hong, and the others, were among them. A handsome young man in a black robe sat in the main seat of the hall. He had a cold expression and was dressed in a black robe. However, even a great saint like Hong could only stand below the main hall. One could imagine that this person's strength was at least in the Undying Realm. Lu Haotsong is an Undying Realm saint. He doesn't dare to appear in the God Realm. So this time, our mission is to kill Murong Yu and Shengzhen. And the young man's cold gaze swept across everyone's faces. A sinister smile flashed across his lips. After killing Shengzhen, we'll drive everyone from the God Realm to the Yang Wilderness Continent. We'll use their blood to stain the Yang Wilderness Continent and revive Huang. That's our real mission. I don't want anything to go wrong this time. Otherwise, there's no need for us to return to the holy world, the young man said indifferently. Everyone's face lit up with excitement. They had waited for this day for a long time. As for those from the God Realm, if they died, so be it. They were nothing more than ants. At the same time, a similar conversation was taking place in the monster spirits' celestial palace. When a human saint army descended, the monster spirits' saint army had descended as well. Their goal was to revive Huang, no matter the cost. Surround Shengzhen and kill Shengzhen once and for all. As soon as the black-robed young man's command, the human army of several 100,000 saints shot toward the holy mountain. The news was spread out immediately. Shengzhen had long since made preparations. He'd activated all kinds of formations, especially the Heart of Illusions. Murong Yu had already taught Murong Xian and the others about the formation. After all, it needed to be changed every 3 days. The speed of the sages was extremely fast. It did not take long for them to appear outside Glory's sect. However, they only surrounded the holy mountain from afar. No one dared to approach. There's an illusion outside the holy mountain. The young man stepped out of the crowd and looked at the holy mountain in the distance with disdain. Hong walked over and said in a deep voice, "My lord, this illusion is so powerful that even a saint won't be able to sense it if he enters. What if it's a great saint?" The black-robed young man asked indifferently. He glanced at the people behind him and pointed at one of them. "You go and try." The person he pointed at was a great saint. Although his cultivation base was still suppressed to the 10th level quasi-saint, he was many times stronger than a saint in other aspects. Without any hesitation, the great saint stage powerhouse rushed out and stepped in the air. In a flash, he had already rushed into the area covered by the Heart of Illusion. What illusion? It's ridiculous. The great saint was full of disdain. He did not take Shengzhen's illusion seriously at all. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. There was no obstruction at all. The great saint had already arrived outside the holy mountain. Finally, he floated above the holy mountain. The violent aura on his body burst out like a tide and swept toward the holy mountain. "Ants of Shengzhen, come out and die." The great saint looked at Shengzhen's disciples with disdain. The great saint shouted. Shengzhen's disciples seemed to have just noticed the great saint and were stunned for a moment. Then they jumped up and fled into the distance, away from the great saint. However, at the same time, Many of Shenzhen's experts rushed into the sky and confronted the great saint in the void. Ha ha! I thought that glory sect would at least have some power and would be able to jump around a little. It turns out that they're all trash. In that case, I'll send you all up today. While laughing, the great saint took a step forward and rushed into the crowd of Shenzhen's experts. Then he punched out. Boom! One of Shenzhen's experts didn't even have time to react before the great saint blew him up. He couldn't be more dead. Ha ha! The great sage burst out laughing. Unleashing all the power he could muster, he unleashed a barrage of attacks. Instantly, one expert after another from Shenzhen was blown up by the great saint. None of them could withstand a single blow from the great saint. Was Shenzhen really so weak? The illusions had no effect at all. All sorts of formations were useless. The great saint had charged in and started a massacre just like that. Was this for real? Of course it wasn't. It was just the great saint's illusion. At this moment, the faces of the saints outside the sacred mountain darkened, their faces as gloomy as water. From what they could see, the great sage had stopped moving since he entered the range of the heart of illusion. Then, they saw the great saint begin to dance with joy, accompanied by waves of wild laughter. Ha ha! These saints are too funny. Did they come to put on a show because they knew that our cultivation lives were boring? Brothers and sisters, come out. There's a saint performing. Seeing the dancing great saint, many of Shenzhen's disciples roared with laughter. On the other hand, the saints' faces were gloomy. This was too embarrassing. However, they were also shocked. Shenzhen's illusion was too terrifying. Even a great saint could unknowingly fall into it. Oof. The black-robed youth snorted coldly, a cold light flashing between his brows. Everyone, since the saints are putting on a show to amuse us, Murong Xian, would like to present a gift to Buddha. Murong Xian's voice slowly sounded. Then, everyone saw a black shadow shoot toward the great saint trapped in the illusion. Not good. The black-robed youth on the saint's side had a bad feeling in his heart. He shouted loudly and reached out with his large hand, grabbing at the great saint trapped in the illusion. Murong Xian sneered, and a blood-red divine light exploded from his body. The divine fist was invincible, and it shattered the sky with a terrifying power that could destroy heaven and earth. It was as if the fist had broken through time and space and had come from the ancient times. Bang! That great sage realm powerhouse who was dancing with joy didn't know that he was about to die. After a loud bang, he was sent flying by Murong Xian's punch. The terrifying power instantly cracked the great sage's body, leaving ghastly wounds all over. Moreover, the blood-red divine light instantly engulfed him. His flesh, blood, and bones were rapidly disappearing and annihilating. After suffering a fatal attack, the great saint finally escaped from the illusion. He was shocked as soon as he appeared and immediately wanted to release the power of a great saint. However, bang! Murong Xian rushed forward again and punched out. Boom! The great sage's fleshly body was blown to pieces. Then, even his soul was annihilated by the blood-red divine light. At this time, the black-robed youth's large hand reached out. A great saint is only SOSO, Murong Xian said indifferently, and his figure flashed back to the Saint Mountain. Although Murong Xian killed a great saint with 2 punches, it seemed that a great saint was similar to a saint. In fact, they were indeed similar in the God realm. This was because their bodies were the same, and their realms were the same. In the Holy Realm, the gap between great saints and saints was huge. Chapter 1171. The great saint was dead. The great saint didn't even have time to resist before he was killed by Murong Xian. And Murong, he was only a 10th stage quasi-saint. When they saw this scene, everyone was shocked once again. They were shocked by Murong Xian's strength, but they were even more shocked by Shenzhen's illusion. Everyone had seen the previous scene. If the great saint was trapped in the illusion, Murong Xian wouldn't be able to kill him easily, no matter how powerful he was. It might even be a problem if he could kill him. After all, this person was a great saint. After suppressing and sealing his realm, he was similar to a saint. But he was much stronger than a saint. If it were someone else, they might not be able to kill him quickly. However, the most unfortunate thing for him was that he met Murong Xian. Murong Xian's inheritance and the power of the eastern wilderness were terrifying. They could easily annihilate an ordinary saint. Good. Shengzhen, good job. The leader of the saint army. The black-clothed young man laughed, but his voice was incomparably cold. Terrifying, murderous intent constantly erupted from his body, shattering the void around him. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. The sages, who were not far behind him, quickly retreated in horror. Because the black-clothed young man's aura was so cold that even saints couldn't withstand it. One could imagine how terrifying this saint's aura was. Sir, Shengzhen's illusion is terrifying. Even a great saint can be trapped in it unknowingly. What should we do? Hong gritted his teeth and withstood the coldness of the black-clothed young man. He walked forward and asked with a gloomy face, "Even if the illusion is powerful, you have to enter it to be affected." The black-clothed young man laughed coldly and pointed out the weakness of the heart of illusion. The illusion created by the heart of illusion was indeed powerful. Even Liu Haozong, who was in the eternal realm, didn't know that he was trapped in it. But the illusion could only cover a certain distance. Sir, what do you mean? Hong raised his eyebrows. He felt disgusted, as if he had eaten a fly. Why didn't he think of this problem? Was it true that the stronger one was, the higher one's intelligence would be? Tell the 10 great sages to unleash their great sage might and attack Shengzhen before they ascend. Although the illusion is powerful, I'd like to see if he can even manipulate the power of the illusion. The black-robed young man sneered, killing intent flashing in his eyes. Hong was overjoyed and hurriedly went to take care of it. Not long after, 10 great sages appeared in front of the crowd of sages, but they did not approach Shengzhen. What are they doing? Many of Shengzhen's disciples were puzzled when they saw those people hovering in the air without doing anything. However, Murong Xian furrowed his brows tightly. Quick, retreat to Shengzhen and activate all the formations on the holy mountain. Murong Xian roared and rushed into the holy mountain. At the same time, after hearing his roar, although many people hadn't reacted yet, they had already activated the array formation of the sacred mountain with all their might. Some of these spirit arrays already existed, while others were added later by Murong Yu. Boom, boom, boom. When Murong Xian roared and Shengzhen and the rest began to activate the array formation, the dozens of great sages outside the holy mountain had already unleashed the power of a great sage at the same time. In an instant, the void shattered and the firmament was destroyed. The terrifying aura swept out in all directions as if doomsday had arrived. Bang, bang, bang. Wherever the aura passed, large pieces of the void collapsed and shattered. As for some of the God Realm experts who were closer to the battle, before they could even react, their bodies had already exploded from the pressure, and their souls had been annihilated. Suddenly, there was a commotion as countless experts used their strongest attacks to shoot off into the distance. However, how could their speed compare to the speed of the great sage's aura? Most of the people had only just reacted when their entire bodies exploded from the pressure. In just a few breaths' time, hundreds of millions of experts were crushed and annihilated. At the same time, when these gods were crushed and annihilated, the terrifying aura had already swept up to the holy mountain. However, when these incomparably terrifying forces swept past the illusion, there was no change in the illusion. As long as the heart of illusion was not attacked or destroyed, no matter how the scenery inside the illusion was shattered, the illusion would not change at all. Nothing that was destroyed in the illusion could be seen. Looking at the 10 great sages' terrifying aura that could make one's soul tremble, the faces of everyone in Shengzhen changed abruptly. These auras were too terrifying. Even a 10th order quasi-saint or an ordinary god would be annihilated in an instant. Could Shengzhen withstand these terrifying attacks? Everyone's heart sank. The holy mountain was as powerful as the floating mountain. However, Everyone only knew that the holy mountain was powerful, but no one had ever seen how powerful it was. Could it withstand the great sages? Everyone in Shenzhen's group was on tenterhooks. When the 10 great sages unleashed their great sage aura, they roared at the same time and slapped out their palms. They used the strongest attack of the great sage realm and pressed down on Shenzhen. However, at the same time, a force from the holy world appeared out of thin air and directly wrapped them up and pulled them into the holy world. The 10 great sages struggled frantically, but it was useless. Under the pull of the force, they quickly rushed into the sky. In the end, they gave up struggling and just attacked Shenzhen with all their strength. The power of a saint had already exceeded the limit of the holy world, let alone a great sage. Therefore, when the 10 great sages unleashed their strongest attacks at Shenzhen at the same time, waves of doomsday aura burst out. It was like the end of the world, making all living things tremble. Even those great sages, and even the undead realm black-clothed youth, had a flash of horror in their eyes. Because this doomsday aura that appeared out of thin air made their souls tremble and tremble. The divine world is still the divine world, too weak. The undead realm black-clothed youth had a flash of fear on his face. Unknowingly, he took a few steps back. However, he soon discovered this instinctive action. Then, he glanced at the others coldly, then took a few steps forward again and stood in his original position. He was an undead realm powerhouse. If even he was afraid, what would the others think? They would definitely despise him. After all, reaching the undead realm was considered to be truly immortal. Of course, immortality did not mean immortality. Rumble, the terrifying aura and power of the 10 great sages bombarded the sky above him at the same time. In an instant, the sky above the holy mountain was quickly annihilated. Ripples burst out like waves, stirring up crazily. Every time it stirred, the power was directly dispersed and rushed to other places. However, many of the formations in Shenzhen's body were bombarded and shattered. Puff! As the formations were shattered one by one, Shenzhen's disciples who were controlling the formations were immediately seriously injured, and some of their bodies even exploded. Some people's souls didn't even have time to escape before they were shattered. Shenzhen's disciples began to fall. Looking from afar, the entire holy mountain was enveloped by rays of divine light of various colors. The void vibrated rapidly, dissipating a large amount of the power of the attacks. In addition, the formations that Murong set up later on also exploded after dissipating a part of the power. There was no way to resist it all. Shenzhen is doomed. Looking at the holy mountain in the distance, which was swayed by the wind and rain and drowned by countless power and divine light, countless people shook their heads and sighed secretly, feeling extremely regretful. However, the black-clothed youth and the other sages sneered and looked at Shenzhen in the distance with a smile on their faces. In their understanding, when 10 great sages attacked at the same time, not to mention a sect in the God realm, even a small sect in the holy world would not be able to resist. At this time, the 10 great sages who attacked had already been pulled back to the holy world by the power of the holy world. The divine light that enveloped the holy mountain gradually disappeared. How is this possible? When the divine light and power that filled the sky completely disappeared, when the complete holy mountain appeared in front of the black-clothed youth and the others, they looked as if they had seen a ghost, and all of them widened their eyes in disbelief. This was because the holy mountain was not razed to the ground as they had imagined. It was safe and sound, although it looked like Shenzhen was in a very sorry state. After all, it was not blasted to smithereens. Could it be that this is just an illusion? In reality, Shenzhen has been razed to the ground? This thought suddenly appeared in countless people's minds. It was no wonder that they would have such thoughts. The ones who attacked were great sages, and there were 10 of them. Although they could not display the true power of a great sage, even if they unleashed their sage aura, this was the God realm, not the holy world. How could the holy mountain be so powerful? Was this possible? This must be an illusion created by the heart of illusion. It must be. The black-clothed youth growled in his heart with an ugly expression. However, this thought was soon torn to pieces, because at this moment, a burst of cheers came from Shenzhen. This was the cheers of surviving a disaster, the cheers of the great sages because he had blocked the attack of a great sage. The black-clothed youth wanted to tell himself that these cheers were also an illusion, but that would undoubtedly be lying to himself. 10 great sages can't destroy the holy mountain. Then let's see how many attacks you can block. The black-clothed youth roared in his heart, and at the same time, he passed down the order. Immediately, 10,000 great sages stepped forward. They were going to use their strongest attacks to destroy the holy mountain. As for why they did not send out any more great sages, the black-clothed youth did not dare do so. Previously, 10 great sages had already caused the God Realm to feel like doomsday. If more people came, wouldn't the God Realm really be doomsday? If that happened, they would not be able to escape. Chapter 1172. Although many of Shenzhen's disciples died, they successfully resisted the attacks of 10 great sages. This made Shenzhen's disciples very excited. However, Murong Xian and the others were not so optimistic. After all, although the holy mountain withstood the previous round of attacks, there were only 10 great sages. There were more than 10 sages, but there were hundreds of thousands of them. If the holy mountain could withstand the first round, then what about the second round? Or even more, it was true that the holy mountain itself was powerful. But no matter what, there was a limit. Once the limit was reached, it would be shattered. What was the limit of the holy mountain? No one knew. Perhaps it couldn't even withstand the second round of attacks. Everyone gather. When he saw the 10,000 sages approaching, Murong Xian suddenly shouted and began to gather everyone. Originally, many of Shenzhen's disciples were cheering, but after seeing the 10,000 sages, they gradually stopped cheering. At the same time, they quickly gathered. Murong Xian, are you going to take the last step? Fan Tong walked over and asked with a solemn expression. Murong Xian nodded. Long before Murong Yu entered the chaotic secret land to cultivate, they had already prepared a backup plan. Some backup plans could be used even if Murong Yu was not there. Now, Murong Xian had to prepare these backup plans. Your father hasn't appeared yet, Fan Tong said with a slight frown. Now that Shenzhen was definitely at a critical moment of life and death, Murong Yu should be there at this time. Not being there was not Murong Yu's character. Father said that he went into seclusion. He is probably at a critical moment. Murong Xian frowned slightly. He was a little worried about Murong Yu. It would be best if Murong Yu really broke through. However, he was worried that something might happen to Murong Yu. Seeing Murong's expression, Fan Tong knew what he was thinking, so he patted Murong's shoulder and said, "Don't worry, your father won't be in trouble so easily." Murong Xian nodded and erased the worry in his heart. Third Uncle Fan, let's see if we can withstand this wave of attacks. I really don't want to give up the sacred mountain, because my father went through untold hardships to bring it back from the monster continent. It is the foundation of our Shenzhen. Fan Tong and Murong Yu were brothers, and they were ranked third. Therefore, Murong, Xian, and the others all called him Third Uncle Fan. Fan Tong nodded. If they could withstand the attack of a saint, who would be willing to leave? After Fan Tong left, 2 figures flitted across the void and appeared in front of Murong Xian. Murong Xian raised his head and looked over. His expression changed slightly, and he was about to leave in a flash. Little Xian, if you dare to leave. A clear voice that sounded like the sound of nature rang in Murong Xian's ears. However, this pleasant voice caused Murong Xian's expression to stiffen, and he groaned inwardly. He didn't think that the voice was pleasant at all. On the contrary, it sounded like the voice of a demon. It made his hair stand on end. Immediately, Murong Xian stopped in his tracks, and then squeezed out a smile as he turned to look at the 2 figures. Miss Lan, Miss Situ. It was Kurlan and Situ Xian who made Murong Xian avoid them, as if they were the plague. Kurlan naturally liked Murong Yu, and even forced Murong Yu to marry her. However, Murong Yu had been avoiding Kurlan all these years. This naturally made Kurlan angry, and she even gnashed her teeth. Most importantly, Zhao Jiqing, Yu Mengqing, and Muli Yue had all acknowledged her identity. In other words, although she wasn't Murong Yu's woman now, she was still Murong Yu's woman. Murong Xian and the others had to call her auntie or something like that when they saw her. However, Murong Xian had never been able to open his mouth. As for Sidu Xian, she was purely a troublemaker. Ever since Murong Yu brought her out of the wasteland, she and Kurlan became incomparably close sisters. In fact, Murong Xian and the others even discovered that she seemed to be a little interested in Murong Yu. It was probably because of this that the two of them were in the same boat. Hearing Murong Xian's address of the two of them, Kurlan's face immediately darkened. Little Xian, what are you saying? Little Xian, Hearing these three words, Murong Xian felt goosebumps all over his body. When he saw Kurlan's murderous look, Murong Xian felt his balls ache even more. In Shenzhen, apart from his parents, who dared to give him any face, he was someone who could easily kill even a great sage. However, Kurlan was an exception. If she wasn't careful, she might become Murong Yu's woman. At that time, she would become Murong Xian's stepmother. Murong Xian felt his balls ache. Gukai, come here. Seeing Murong Xian's pained expression, Kurlan immediately waved Gukai, who had just passed by them. Master's wives, why did you call this disciple here? I still have to go help. Gukai immediately flew over and looked at the three with a silly smile. Hearing Gukai's address, Kurlan and Situ Xian immediately beamed with joy. Murong Xian, on the other hand, had a pained expression on his face. This Gukai really made people speechless. Zhao Jiqing and the other two women were his master's wives, and Kurlan and Situ Xian were also his master's wives. However, his only master was Murong Yu. Little Xian, look at how polite Gukai is, and you call him so formally. Kurlan turned to look at Murong Xian, her expression gloomy again. Murong Xian felt his balls ache as he said, Ladies, I don't know where father is, and now I have to preside over the overall situation. So I'll leave first. After saying that, Murong Xian's figure flashed and left. Kurlan and Situ Xian looked at each other and laughed. Their original intention was to ask about Murong Yu's whereabouts. However, Murong Xian really didn't seem to know Murong Yu's whereabouts, and Murong Xian really wanted to preside over the overall situation. Isn't there still Murong Xian? Situ Xian suddenly smiled. On the other side of Shenzhen, Murong Xian suddenly shuddered. Then he looked around and said to the people around him, If someone is looking for me, say that you didn't see me. After saying that, his figure flashed and disappeared. It seemed that the two brothers were tortured badly by Kurlan and Situ Xian. It was a long story, but in fact it was all just a few sentences long. At this time, all of Shenzhen's people had gathered together. But this time, they didn't preside over any formation, because early on in the first round, the formation they set up had all been blown up. In fact, just now, they completely relied on the Holy Mountain's own ability to block the attacks of the 10 great sages. Destroy them. At this time, the black-clothed youth finally ordered to attack the Holy Mountain. Suddenly, a total of 10,000 saint powerhouses all released the seals in their bodies, raising their strength to the saint stage. The moment the seals were released, their bodies were affected by the power of the Holy Realm, trying to force them out of the divine realm and back to the holy realm. However, these people didn't care about these forces at all. The moment they recovered their strength was raised to the limit. Rumble, the next moment, they attacked at the same time. Suddenly, tens of thousands of terrifying forces surged out like a torrent, then condensed into one in the void like a vast ocean. Whoosh! A terrifying pressure erupted, shattering the void and intimidating thousands of worlds. However, whether it was the pressure or the aura, it was much weaker than the full force of the 10 great sages just now. But the actual destructive power was much stronger than the combined power of the 10 great sages. Whoosh! After the tens of thousands of saints blasted out their power, they were pulled back to the Holy Realm. Because they were no longer in charge, the power that was released weakened a little. But it still had a terrifying pressure that could destroy heaven and earth. Boom! After an earth-shattering explosion, this terrifying force bombarded the Holy Mountain. Suddenly, the Holy Mountain that was originally suspended in the sky seemed to be ruthlessly pressed down by a large hand. The cone-like bottom was directly slapped deep into the ground. Bang! 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 At the same time, when the Holy Mountain was sunk, an extremely powerful force had already passed through the Holy Mountain's heavy defenses and blasted up. Suddenly, the mountains in the Holy Mountain collapsed, the ground sank, and the rivers shifted. Some of the weaker Shangzhen's disciples were directly blown up. In less than an instant, the number of Shangzhen's disciples killed or injured reached tens of millions. Retreat! Everyone retreat from the Holy Mountain. Seeing this scene, Murong Xian immediately roared, and at the same time, both of his hands kept grabbing out, crushing the raging forces. The other quasi-saint powerhouses also took action, either to destroy the raging forces or to protect the Shangzhen's disciples around them. However, even if they took action in time, there were still Shangzhen's disciples dying. Retreat! Quickly enter the teleportation array. The higher-ups and saints of Shangzhen all shouted, because they all saw that the Holy Mountain was a little overwhelmed at this time. If this continued, the Holy Mountain would be blown up. Once the Holy Mountain was blown up, Shangzhen's disciples would be slaughtered by those saints. Therefore, they had to evacuate before the Holy Mountain was blown up. Bastard! Looking at the chaotic Shangzhen, the black-clothed youth couldn't help but yell angrily. With a wave of his hand, 100,000 saints flew up. He wanted to use 100,000 saints to blast Shangzhen to death. How could the Holy Mountain, which couldn't even withstand 10,000 saints, withstand the combined attack of 100,000 saints? Blow them up! The black-clothed youth roared with murderous intent. Immediately, the 100,000 saints unlocked the seal on their bodies without any hesitation. Damn it! Seeing this scene, countless powerhouses of Shangzhen's expression changed drastically, and some even cursed out loud, because they suddenly realized that in the previous attack, many of the teleportation arrays they had set up were shattered. In other words, when the 100,000 saints attack landed on the Holy Mountain, most of Shangzhen's people couldn't evacuate. Once the Holy Mountain was blown up, they would die without a doubt. While they were cursing, the power of the 100,000 sages had already come crashing down from the sky. Chapter 1173. It's over. At this moment, most of Shangzhen's people were in despair. How could the sacred mountain withstand the power of 100,000 saints at the same time? Even Shangzhen's disciples felt a destructive aura coming down on them. Bang! 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 Before the power came down, it was still in the sky. The terrifying aura suppressed the mountains above the sacred mountain, and the ground kept shattering. Fortunately, all of Shangzhen's experts burst out with powerful strength to protect the weaker disciples. Otherwise, it wouldn't be the mountains and buildings that were destroyed, but Shangzhen's disciples. However, Shangzhen had too many disciples, and there weren't many quasi-saint experts, especially those from the desolate world. Although their physical bodies were strong, their realms weren't strong. Therefore, in this situation, they couldn't help at all. In fact, Shangzhen's quasi-saint couldn't withstand the attack of 100,000 saints. As the power kept coming down, Shangzhen's quasi-saint couldn't hold on any longer. The worst thing was that under these attacks, Shangzhen's teleportation formations started to collapse. Once the teleportation formations collapsed, they couldn't teleport out, unless Murong Yu came in time and used Hichu Luo Shu to take them all in. Boom! 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 The entire sacred mountain began to shake violently, and the sound shook the sky as if the end of the world was coming. Shangzhen's disciples in the sacred mountain saw the sky above the sacred mountain begin to collapse. A strong aura of death shrouded the hearts of Shangzhen's disciples. Bang! The power of 100,000 saints finally hit the sacred mountain. The first to bear the brunt of it were the quasi-saint. In just a moment of contact, countless quasi-saint in Shenzhen began to vomit blood. And this was just the beginning. The quasi-saint protecting Shenzhen's disciples immediately felt like the sacred mountains of the saint's world were tearing through space and crashing down from the saint's world. Some quasi-saint whose physical bodies were not strong enough could not withstand it at all. Puff! Streams of blood burst out from their bodies. This was the reason why their bodies were blown apart. Once these quasi-saint were injured, the disciples of Shenzhen who were under their protection would be in an even worse state. All of them died as their bodies exploded. It was extremely miserable. In less than an instant, more than 1,000th of Shenzhen's low-level disciples had died. However, even more disciples were seriously injured. There are few who are not injured. Rumble, quasi-saint, was injured and countless disciples were killed. These were not the most fatal to Shenzhen. The most fatal and despairing thing was that after these forces bombarded them, all the teleportation arrays on the sacred mountains exploded. If Shenzhen's people wanted to leave this place, they could not use the teleportation arrays. They could only break through by force. However, how difficult was it to break through? The hundreds of thousands of saints outside were not just for show. Is our Shenzhen going to be completely wiped out today? Many people of Shenzhen roared at the sky. They were unwilling to accept this. Holy Lord, where are you? Suddenly, a Shenzhen's disciple knelt on the ground and roared. Holy Lord, please come out soon. Our Shenzhen is going to be destroyed. If you don't come back, our Shenzhen will definitely be wiped out. Countless Shenzhen's disciples knelt on the ground and kept shouting. Ha ha! Seeing this scene, the many saints in the distance all laughed out loud. They all felt that their anger had been vented. Previously, when a great saint was killed and 10 great saints attacked at the same time, they were unable to destroy the sacred mountains. Shenzhen is going to be finished this time. Countless gods in the distance saw this scene, and their faces turned ugly. Although they did not ally with Shenzhen, they were still gods after all. Now that Shenzhen was being suppressed by those saints, they could not help but feel sad. Shenzhen's disciples began to die in large numbers. There were even quasi-saint casualties. And now, the power of the 100,000 saints had only bombarded the sacred mountains and had not completely bombarded them. The death rate of Shenzhen's disciples had exceeded 1%. One could imagine how many of Shenzhen's disciples would be able to survive when the power of the 100,000 saints came down. Everyone, attack with all your strength. We must block this wave of attacks. Our Shenzhen will never be destroyed by those trash. Morong Xian roared with red eyes. His body was already enveloped by blood-red divine light. If one looked carefully, the blood-red divine light did not burst out from his body. Instead, it directly gathered on his body from the void. Then, under Morong Xian's control, the blood-red divine light continued to burst out, covering the sky and bombarding the power of the 100,000 saints who were descending from above. This power was not Morong Xian's own power, but was directly extracted from Dong Huan's body. This power had an extremely terrifying annihilation effect. If it bombarded a saint's body, it would be annihilated. However, in the face of the combined power of the 100,000 saints, Morong Xian's power was not enough. Apart from Morong Xian, who dared to clash with the power of the saints, the others could only try their best to protect themselves and the people around them. Despair spread wildly in Shenzhen. At this moment, there were even people who gave up resisting. Resist? So what if they resisted with all their strength? They could not resist at all. In fact, in the end, many disciples of Glory Sect could only look on with pale faces at the terrifying power that was crashing down on them like a tidal wave. Soon, they would die under this power and be completely annihilated. Ants will always be ants. The black-clothed youth smiled faintly with a look of disdain. However, when he thought of how Emir Shenzhen had wasted more than 100,000 saints, he gnashed his teeth in hatred. Moreover, Shenzhen was about to be destroyed, but he still did not see Morong Yu. This made him feel a little uneasy. He's just a god. I'm an expert of the undead realm. The black-clothed youth sneered and despised himself. He despised himself for feeling uneasy because of a god. After Shenzhen is destroyed, immediately drive everyone from the divine world to the Yanghuang mainland. The matter of reviving Yanghuang cannot be delayed. The black-clothed youth said to Hong, who was beside him, indifferently. Hong nodded. Their main purpose this time was to revive Yanghuang. Of course, the original war was just a means. However, it was destroyed by Murongyu. Moreover, Shenzhen's strength had grown rapidly and became the #1 force in the divine world. They wanted to destroy Shenzhen not only because he destroyed the plan of reviving Yanghuang. The most important thing was that they wanted to kill Shenzhen to intimidate the entire divine world. As long as they destroyed Shenzhen and gave the order, which force in the divine world would not dare to obey them? Swoosh! Just when everyone thought that Shenzhen was about to be destroyed, a figure appeared in the sky above the sacred mountain. It was a black-clothed youth. Divine light burst out from his body and rushed towards the sky. The power of the 100,000 saints that were attacking from the sky seemed to be dissipating. Shenzhen's disciples, come out. Today we are going to kill a saint. A loud voice sounded like thunder in the entire Shenzhen and outside Shenzhen. Sacred Master. Sacred Master is back. Hearing this voice, the disciples of Shenzhen who were in despair seemed to have grabbed onto a life-saving straw and instantly recovered their survival instinct. At the same time, the faces of many people outside changed, especially the black-clothed youth. Seeing that Shenzhen was about to be destroyed, Murongyu still rushed over. If he wasn't an idiot, then he must have the means to hold on to Shenzhen or even counterattack. While everyone was bewildered, figures continuously shot out from Murongyu's side. Roar! 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 Roars that shook the sky were constantly heard. At this moment, Shenzhen's disciples were stunned, because they saw different kinds of ferocious beasts that were bursting with murderous aura appear in the sky. Their auras were huge, and their blood was surging. In less than an instant, there were tens of millions of ferocious beasts that appeared in Shenzhen. In addition to these ferocious beasts, there were also human experts with monstrous auras and demon experts with monstrous auras. These people all had one thing in common. They were at least quasi-saint level. Moreover, they were all high-level quasi-saint level. There were more than 100 million quasi-saint level experts. After these ferocious beasts, human experts, and demon experts appeared, they immediately soared into the sky and flew to every corner of the sacred mountain in an orderly manner. What's going on? Where did these people come from? Since when were there so many quasi-saint level experts in the realm of the gods? When they saw this scene, Shenzhen's disciples, the saints, and the spectators were all shocked and puzzled. While they were puzzled, these experts had already unleashed their strongest attacks. How powerful was the power of more than 100 million high-level quasi-saint level experts at the same time? It was impossible to describe it with words. The power of the 100,000 saints that were suppressing Shenzhen's disciples in despair was easily torn apart by this power. Kill all of them. Murongyu let out a furious roar after easily shattering those energies. Immediately, more than 100 million high-level quasi-saint level experts locked onto the saints in the distance and unleashed their strongest attacks. What a powerful power! Seeing the power of these high-level quasi-saint level experts, everyone was stunned. Even the saints were the same. Retreat. Hurry up and retreat. When he saw the terrifying power roaring towards him, the black-clothed young man roared, and his figure flickered as he retreated. However, before some of the saints could react, the power of more than 100 million high-level quasi-saint level experts had already drowned them. Chapter 1174. Rumble. The moment the power of more than 100 million high-level quasi-saints came crashing down, a large purplish-black cloud of blood appeared in the sky above the world. Whenever a saint died in the god realm, blood clouds, blood rain, and blood-colored lightning would appear in the sky. The more saints died, the darker the color of the blood clouds. At this moment, the blood clouds had turned purplish-black, or even black. One could only imagine how many saints were killed. Holy realm, human race. For countless years, the human race and the sacred race had been constantly at war. Both sides had constantly lost people. However, the long war had caused the human race to have a habit. As long as it was someone who went to war, their soul jade slips would be preserved. There was only one reason for this, and that was to know whether they were dead or alive. If they were trapped, they could also know whether they had died or not from their soul jade slips. If they died, they wouldn't send troops to rescue them. Although they felt that going to the God Realm to kill a small God Realm faction was like an ant, it was impossible for a saint to die. However, out of habit, the soul jade slips of those who had come down were still collected. Not long after, a great saint's soul jade slip suddenly exploded. This had already angered the human race's saints in the God Realm. Then they saw the 10 quasi-saint and 110,000 saints actually ascend. Because of this, they became even more furious. Some of the saints were even cursing good for nothing. If it was said that they were only furious now, then in a moment, they were completely enraged. Because just now, over 100,000 saints' soul jade slips exploded at the same time. They were all saints from the lower realm. Moreover, they all exploded at the same time. In other words, those 100,000 saints were killed at the same time. They were only in the God Realm. Who in the God Realm had the ability to kill 100,000 saints in one go? Could it be that bastard Lu Haotsong made a move? After being stunned for a while, a saint roared angrily. Lu Haotsong couldn't have made a move. If he dared to make a move in the God Realm, he would have already ascended. He wouldn't dare appear in the Holy Realm again. Moreover, even if an undead realm expert sealed his realm and power, the God Realm still wouldn't be able to stop him. Another human clan expert immediately said, "No wonder there was only one undead realm expert from the human clan who came down. It was no wonder that Lu Haotsong stayed in the chaotic secret plane and did not come out of the God Realm. So it was because the God Realm was unable to withstand an imperishable realm expert. Then how were they killed?" Someone roared out. To them, 100,000 ordinary saints were nothing at all. They didn't feel sorry for the deaths of these people. Rather, in order to send them down, they had spent a lot of resources. If they could revive Desolate, then wasting those resources wasn't a big deal. However, if the resources were wasted, people would die, and the mission would not be completed. This was what made them angry. Who killed them? Hurry up and check. I don't believe that they have all committed suicide. A saint expert roared with killing intent. Back in the deity world, when more than 100 million quasi-saint powerhouses appeared in Shenzhen, they easily tore apart the power of the 100,000 powerhouses. At the same time, they unleashed their strongest attack and killed 100,000 saints with a single sentence. At this moment, the black-clothed youth and the remaining hundreds of thousands of saints were like startled rabbits, quickly flying into the distance. This was not the God Realm. If they were in the God Realm, these 100 million quasi-saint powerhouses might not be able to kill a single saint. This was because even if a saint couldn't block the attacks, his speed would allow him to escape to a safe distance after the attacks came crashing down. And an undead realm expert could kill all of them with a single slap. Even a billion quasi-saint powerhouses would be able to do the same. However, this was the God Realm. Even if an undead realm expert risked being pulled back to the God Realm and unleashed his strongest attack, he still wouldn't be able to kill these people, because their power was suppressed. And the black-clothed youth definitely wouldn't dare to go back like this. If he went back to the Holy Realm like this, only death would await him. He was the only one who had successfully completed the mission and revived Eastern Wasteland. So even if these people all died, the people above could not do anything to him. Kill! Over 100 million quasi-saint powerhouses roared in unison. Their voices shook the sky, and even the dome of the sky was shattered. Large areas began to collapse. After a roar, these powerhouses soared into the sky and chased after the saints. After the first exchange of blows, 100,000 saints were killed. The others were already scared out of their wits. So how could they dare to stay? Moreover, the black-clothed youth was the first to escape. The others wished they had 2 more legs so that they could escape as quickly as possible. Some of the saints couldn't help but unleash their might and strength out of fear. They didn't want to fight back against the 100 million quasi-saint powerhouses. Instead, they wanted to escape back to the God realm. However, Shenzhen's 100 million quasi-saint powerhouses were extremely ferocious. Streams of terrifying power continued to bombard the fleeing sages. One by one, the fleeing sages perished. Even the saints who had their seals removed were killed when they flew into the sky. In addition to the 100,000 saints who had been killed at the beginning, another 100,000 saints had been killed as well. In other words, Shenzhen's counterattack this time killed more than 200,000 saints. The dome of the sky was covered by black blood clouds. A sorrowful feeling shrouded the entire God realm. Countless people in the God realm felt uneasy. Shenzhen's powerhouses stopped after killing tens of billions of miles away. Saints were saints after all. Whether it was speed or other aspects, they were still stronger than the quasi-saint powerhouses. The strength of the quasi-saint powerhouses was uneven. They could no longer maintain a distance of tens of billions of miles. If they continued to chase, they would be defeated by the saints one by one. The sage had been utterly defeated. It didn't take long for the news to spread throughout the entire God realm. Everyone who heard the news was stunned. That was a saint. A saint who was powerful enough to destroy the world was killed just like that. After being shocked for a long time, they finally reacted. How did Shenzhen suddenly have so many high-level saints? It was not only the others who were puzzled. Even the people in Shenzhen were puzzled. At this time, the quasi-saint powerhouses had all returned to Shenzhen and hidden. 100 million people was not a lot, but they disappeared into the crowd after suppressing their realm. Of course, this was only referring to the quasi-saint powerhouses of the human race. The quasi-saint powerhouses of the demon race had a monstrous demonic aura. Even if they were hidden in the crowd, they could be seen at a glance. Of course, if they retracted their demonic aura, others would not be able to recognize them. In fact, those ferocious beasts were not easy to hide, because some of the ferocious beasts were extremely large. Even if they retracted their aura, they were still extremely ferocious. They were extremely terrifying. Moreover, Shenzhen's disciples realized that there were many more ferocious beasts than the human and demon race powerhouses that appeared later. However, what they did not know was that there were still many ferocious beasts that did not appear in Shenzhen. In order to not let these ferocious beasts scare Shenzhen's disciples, in the end, Muronyu still kept all the ferocious beasts in Hichu Luoshu world. In the sacred palace, the main higher-ups of Shenzhen were gathered. Father, where did you invite these powerhouses from? Everyone stood in the sacred palace for a long time, but they were still in shock. Although they had doubts in their hearts, no one voiced them out. In the end, Murong Xian could not help but ask. They are powerhouses of the Qing Yun realm. Murong glanced at everyone and did not hide anything. Powerhouses of the Qing Yun realm? Everyone was stunned. They all knew of the existence of the Qing Yun realm, and they all knew that the Qing Yun realm was a place of no return. For countless years, no one had ever come out. Of course, Murong Xian and a few other people knew that Murong could enter and leave the Qing Yun realm. But when did Murong subdue all the powerhouses of the Qing Yun realm? That was impossible. But looking at how respectful the powerhouses of the Qing Yun realm were to Murong, even the ferocious beasts were respectful in front of Murong. From today onwards, I am the lord of the Qing Yun realm. Murong did not explain much, but just this sentence shocked everyone. That's right, Murong had already subdued the Qing Yun realm. The reason why he did not appear when Shenzhen was almost destroyed by the saints, other than because he had not broken through in the beginning, was that he had not subdued the Qing Yun realm. Without the powerhouses of the Qing Yun realm. So what if he appeared? At most, he could only take Shenzhen's disciples into Hichu Luoshu. But abandoning the sect and running away? Although this was a way to preserve his strength, it was also a humiliation. Unless it was absolutely necessary, Murong would definitely not do this. Actually, there was another reason why Murong did not appear in time. That was that Lu Haozong did not tell him that Shenzhen was surrounded by the Saints' army. If he knew about this in advance, he might not have been able to break through. This was because he was at the critical moment of breaking through. However, in the end, he successfully broke through to the quasi-saint realm. After reaching the quasi-saint realm, Murongyu entered Hichu Luoshu to speed up time and consolidate his cultivation. Then, he directly entered the Qingyun realm. The Qingyun realm existed because of the Zhe character. As long as he mastered the Zhe character and reached the quasi-saint realm, he would be able to control the entire Qingyun realm, and thus every life in the Qingyun realm. Therefore, after Murongyu broke through and entered the Qingyun realm, he felt as if the Qingyun realm was a divine weapon that recognized him as its master. And the many lives in the Qingyun realm were directly under his control. Dominating, without any effort, Murongyu took control of the Qingyun realm. Then he brought the hundreds of millions of high-level quasi-saint in the Qingyun realm back to Shenzhen with murderous intent. Chapter 1175. 100 million quasi-saint, or even more quasi-saint, was nothing in the holy world. But it was different in the divine world. Not to mention a few 100,000 saints with their powers sealed. Even if there were millions of them, they would still be killed. Of course, if those saints reacted and unleashed the power of the saint realm, hundreds of millions of quasi-saints would die in large numbers. The reason why Shenzhen's experts were able to kill more than 200,000 saints was because they were caught off guard. In the next battle, it might not be so effective. Moreover, everyone knew that this was definitely not the last battle. The hundreds of thousands of saints who had been killed would definitely make a comeback, and there might even be more experts descending. After all, Murongyu had constantly ruined their plans, and now he had humiliated the saints. If they did not kill Murongyu, they would not be able to get back the face they had lost. In the main hall of Primeval College, a black-clothed youth sat on the main seat with a gloomy expression. Many experts in the hall looked at each other, not daring to breathe too loudly. This time, the losses were extremely heavy. This had already infuriated them, especially the black-clothed youth, who was abnormally furious. Most importantly, there was another order from the higher-ups. The higher-ups were extremely furious and ordered them to deal with Murongyu and Shenzhen within a month, and then revive Yang Huang as quickly as possible. "Sir, what should we do?" After everyone was silent for a long time, finally, an expert could not help but ask. Right now, they had to kill Murongyu and revive Yang Huang. Otherwise, they would never be able to return to the holy world. Even if they sneaked back, they would be hunted down by the human race. As for whether there would be anyone coming down from the holy world, if they were all annihilated, there might be people coming down from the holy world. But now they would not continue to send people down, because the price of sending a person down was too great. "What should we do?" The black-clothed youth looked coldly at the saint who spoke. "Murongyu must die. Shenzhen must be destroyed. But Shenzhen has so many experts. If they all release their powers at the same time, we will definitely not be their match. Furthermore, would they still be waiting for us to attack them at Glory Sect?" A sage stood out with a grim look on his face as he asked in a deep voice. "I didn't expect you to have smart people. Our Shenzhen will not just passively take a beating. Today is the day of our Shenzhen's counterattack." Before the sage's voice could fade away, a thunderous voice came from the sky. All the saints in the Desolate Academy were stunned when they heard that. Then, they reacted one by one, and their expressions changed drastically. "It's Murongyu's voice. He actually dared to appear here." These saints were especially familiar with Murongyu's voice. It was because of the owner of this voice that more than 200,000 of their saints had fallen. For this voice to suddenly appear here, in an instant, everyone had a bad feeling in their hearts. And just as they had this feeling, an extremely terrifying pressure that made their souls tremble descended from the heavens. Everyone's heart skipped a beat. Out of instinct, each of them began to unleash their strongest attacks, blasting out streams of powerful power into the depths of the sky. However, it was already too late. At the same time as their powers blasted out, Streams of power that were like a violent storm had already shattered the sky and bombarded the great desolate academy. Suddenly, rumble, after a series of earth-shattering explosions, everything in Primeval College exploded. There were even saints whose bodies and souls had been destroyed. They died. The blood cloud appeared again. Under the blood cloud, many figures seemed to have appeared out of thin air, hovering above the heavens. Their auras soared into the sky, and their blood was surging. They were constantly blasting out waves of terrifying power that could destroy the heavens and earth. Who else could they be other than Shangzhen's high-level quasi-saint? More than 100 million high-level quasi-saint appeared out of thin air, and once again, the saints were caught off guard. In just a breath's time, more than 100,000 saints were killed. The blood cloud above the heavens turned purplish-black. Unleash the power of a saint and join forces to kill them. At this moment, the black-clad young man and the others finally came out of the main hall. To be precise, they had finally rushed out of the ruins. This was because the main hall they were in had been razed to the ground by Shangzhen's powerhouses. Caught off guard, the saints were all in a panic. Some of them unleashed a powerful force, wanting to escape back to the holy world. Some of them had already used their fastest speed to shoot out in all directions, wanting to escape from this place. Therefore, when the black-clad young man roared, they came to a realization. They were saints. If they unleashed their full power, the quasi-saint wouldn't be able to do anything to them no matter how powerful he was. Therefore, they began to gather together and join forces to attack. However, at this moment, the power that was originally like a surging torrent turned into a trickle at this moment. The saints immediately looked up in surprise, only to see that there were only a few people above them. Moreover, those people were still disappearing into thin air. What's going on? The saints were stunned, not knowing what was going on. They're running away. Kill them. Don't let them go. There was no lack of saints who reacted quickly. When these people saw the people in the void disappearing, they immediately reacted. They knew that Murong Yu and the others were only attacking for a while and were about to run away. Hearing this, the saints reacted and shouted. However, there was no sign of Shangzhen's powerhouses in the sky. Damn it! Looking at the purplish-black blood cloud in the sky, the black-clad young man finally couldn't help but curse. Was it useful to curse? Obviously, it was useless. Another 100,000 saints have fallen. Hong's face was gloomy. The muscles on his face were extremely ferocious due to his anger, and a terrifying cold aura exploded from his body. Adding the 200,000 saints from before and the 100,000 saints now, 400,000 saints had been killed. One must know that before this, no one knew if there were 400,000 quasi-saint in the realm of the gods. What did 400,000 saints mean? This time, more than half of the hundreds of thousands of saints from the lower realm had fallen. However, the black-clad young man hadn't completed a single mission. Not only did he not complete his mission, but he also suffered such heavy losses this time. Even if he had someone above him, he wouldn't have a good ending. It's all because of that bastard Murong Yu. The black-clad young man roared in his heart, his killing intent overflowing. He couldn't wait to charge towards Shangzhen and kill Shangzhen and Murong Yu. However, how could Murong Yu given the chance to do so? Defend with all your might. Next time, if you encounter their despicable sneak attack, I don't want to see you all in such a mess like today. The black-clad young man looked at Hong and the rest furiously. Then he quickly left. Hong and the rest were depressed as they cursed Murong Yu in their hearts, the sacred world. The important figures who had received the news of another 100,000 saints' deaths gathered together once again. Their faces were ashen, and their killing intent filled the air. No one knew if they were targeting the black-clad young man or Murong Yu. However, it didn't matter. Murong Yu dared to go against them because he was already prepared to go against the human race of the sacred world. Even if they had supreme beings, Murong Yu wasn't afraid at all. Haha, this feels great. In the Hichu, Luoshu world, Qin Shaowei laughed heartily. His strength wasn't much to begin with. However, all these years, He had been locked up in the Hichu Luo Shu by Murong Yu to accelerate time and use blood crystals to increase his comprehension. His cultivation had finally reached the quasi-saint realm. Just now, he had also participated in the battle to kill the saints. Although he didn't kill a saint on his own, he still had a part to play, didn't he? Therefore, as soon as he entered the Hichu Luo Shu world, he laughed heartily, causing Murong Yu and the rest to look at him with disdain. Do you want to feel even better? Murong Yu looked at Qin Shaowei with a smile on his face. Could it be that you want to execute the decapitation plan? Qin Shaowei looked at Murong Yu with slight surprise. The others were the same. However, Murong Yu shook his head. Not to mention whether the black-clad young man could be decapitated. Even if it could be done, Murong Yu wouldn't do it. This was because once the black-clad young man was decapitated, who knew if the saints would go crazy? If they went crazy and started a massacre in the realm of the gods, how would they stop them? One had to know that the strength of a saint was extremely terrifying. They could easily massacre an entire continent. If hundreds of thousands of saints went on a killing spree, they wouldn't be able to stop them at all. Moreover, if they killed him, there would definitely be experts from the realm of the saints coming down. Murong Yu's plan was to kill all of them. As long as the black-clad young man was still around, the saints wouldn't scatter. Go now. After hearing Murong Yu's plan, the word crazy appeared in everyone's mind. This was because Murong Yu was going to attack again. The saints had just been ambushed once, so they would definitely be on guard now. If they attacked again, wouldn't they be courting death? Why? Scared? Murong Yu smiled faintly. What's there to be scared of? Fantong immediately shouted in a low voice. Fantong, go to one side. With your strength, you'd better not get involved. Qin Shaowei glared at Fantong. This guy's strength had already reached the heavenly venerable tier, but he couldn't kill a saint, because he hadn't attacked just now. Fantong chuckled, not minding. Woof woof. I, Lord Heavenly Dog, also want to taste a saint recently. The large black dog rushed over from afar. It was a mess, and beside him was the fire-eyed golden ape that was inseparable from him. These two idiots were also quasi-saint level elites. Moreover, they had already reached the high-level quasi-saint level, the one whose strength sword could be called fast. Chapter 1176. The fire-eyed golden ape had obtained the inheritance of the heavenly demon god. In addition to his own physique and decent aptitude, his cultivation was already very fast. During this period of time, he had also used the blood crystal to accelerate time, so his strength naturally skyrocketed. The big black dog was originally a heavenly dog. As long as there was something strong enough for him to devour, his strength would continue to increase. In fact, it was not only the big black dog and the fire-eyed golden ape who had broken through to the quasi-saint level. Murong Yu's brothers and friends were not weak. The little ape king, the little lion king, and even the little rock king were the same. Murong Yu was not a heartless person. He would not forget his brothers and friends in the past just because he had become stronger. On the contrary, he would definitely benefit from these people. Your strength is still too weak. This time, I only need a small number of experts to take action. Hence, there is no quasi-saint level 10. Don't come and join the fun. Murong Yu glanced at the big black dog indifferently and said. The big black dog and the others were instantly depressed. Since there is no split, then what is there to say? Isn't this blatant seduction and making their hearts itch? Everyone looked at Murong Yu with disdain. Murong Yu only smiled faintly. His figure flashed, and he disappeared into Hichu Luo Shu. Not long after, Murong Yu chose 1,000 experts who were at the peak of the 10th level quasi-saint level. After choosing these people, Murong Yu controlled Hichu Luo Shu to hide in the void and slowly sneak into Primeval College. Although the sacred sects had lost more than 100,000 people after being attacked by Shenzhen's experts, they did not leave. However, they did not leave the place and remain stationed there. However, their vigilance was several times stronger. Waves of enormous divine senses interweaved like a spider's web throughout the entire Primeval College and the surrounding space. The defense was so tight that even mosquitoes could not enter. Perhaps to others, even the assassins of the spirit sect, they could not sneak in. However, these dense, spiderweb-like spiritual senses could not stop Murong-Yu's footsteps at all. Murong-Yu walked out of the Hichu Luoshu world with a single step. There was not a single ripple in the void, as he had already hidden himself in the depths of the void. Hichu Luoshu could shrink to the size of a particle, making it difficult for ordinary people to detect. However, it wasn't as well hidden as Murong-Yu's true body. Murong-Yu strolled into Primeval College under the watchful eyes of countless divine wills and sages. Primeval College was huge, and it was hard to detect the hundreds of thousands of sages hiding here. However, a saint was still a saint after all. Even though he had sealed his power, he still exuded an aura that soared into the sky. Murong-Yu only glanced at it and then walked straight up. Not long after, many courtyards appeared in front of him. There were many saints in each courtyard. There were tens of thousands of saints in these courtyards. It was the place with the highest concentration of saints in the entire Primeval College. Murong-Yu frowned slightly. He had thought that these saints would definitely be scattered, so he wanted to use 1,000 powerhouses to prepare a sneak attack and gradually nibble away at the saints. However, there were tens of thousands of saints now. This is an excellent opportunity. Murong-Yu stopped in the void, his eyes flashing. Whoosh! After thinking for a while, Murong-Yu appeared in the Hichu Luoshu world. Holy Lord, when are we going to make a move? I can't wait any longer. After seeing Murong-Yu, a peak quasi-saint rubbed his hands together and asked, "This time, we'll do it together." Murong-Yu smiled faintly, then moved his mind. Whoosh! 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 In an instant, the quasi-saint powerhouses in the Hichu Luoshu world appeared next to Murong-Yu out of thin air. Woof! What's going on? Are they going to attack at full force? The large black dog started to bark madly, running all over the place. He was incredibly excited. This time, our target is tens of thousands of saints, Murong-Yu said in a deep voice. At the same time, he opened the Hichu Luoshu world's foot and revealed the saints in the courtyards. We only have one chance to attack. After that, no matter how many people we kill, we'll retreat immediately. Everyone nodded slightly, their faces full of uncontrollable excitement. At the same time, they began to raise their cultivation level one by one, raising their strength to the peak. After everyone had raised their strength to the peak, Murong-Yu completely opened the Hichu Luoshu world. Attack! Murong-Yu roared. Suddenly, hundreds of millions of quasi-saint powerhouses attacked at the same time. An enormous power condensed into a torrent of power in midair, rushing out of the Hichu Luoshu world and covering the area in front of them in an instant. The moment the power appeared, many of the Primeval College's saints had already reacted. Suddenly, one by one, they exploded with powerful strength and divine consciousness, trying to find the source of the power. However, the power appeared out of thin air. They could not see where the power appeared and who attacked. Swoosh! The tens of thousands of powerhouses who were shrouded by the power felt their hearts skip a beat. An extremely strong aura of death instantly shrouded their hearts. The saints were instantly scared half to death. Without prior agreement, they burst forth with their fastest speed, breaking through the building they were in, and quickly flew into the distance. However, just as they rose into the air, the power that Murong-Yu and the others had been preparing for a long time came crashing down on them. Rumble! Countless saints' physical bodies and souls were immediately blown apart. Due to the fall of the saints, layers of blood clouds continued to appear, gradually turning from the original blood-red color to a purplish-black color. Ambush! Murong-Yu is ambushing again. One of the saints was enraged. Holy light flickered on his body, and waves of power were continuously blasted out by him, blasting into the sky. The other saints also reacted, bursting with their strongest attacks in all directions. However, Other than the void constantly being blasted and the spatial turbulence constantly being blasted out, where was Murong and the others? Many of the saints roared angrily and rose into the air, continuously blasting out power as if they had gone mad. However, no one dared to leave Primeval College's territory. At that moment, there were already 20,000 to 30,000 saints who had been killed. Apart from these people, there were also many saints who had been severely injured. There were also countless people who had suffered minor injuries. Murong, the black-clothed young man, rose into the air, his face ashen. He gritted his teeth and said those 3 words, his eyes full of resentment. They did not know how Murong could suddenly appear in Primeval College. Was the entire Primeval College not covered by their divine telekinesis? Could Murong ignore their divine telekinesis? The black-clothed young man was so angry that his lungs were about to explode. Hong and the others felt a trace of fear. Finally, the other ordinary saints felt even more depressed. If Murong were to come a few more times, none of the hundreds of thousands of them would be left alive. Moreover, they all had a feeling that this would not be the last ambush. "Sir, what should we do?" Hong came in front of the black-clothed young man, who had a murderous aura and seemed like he was about to swallow someone whole, and asked carefully. The black-clothed young man did not say anything, but his eyes were emitting a substantial murderous aura as he looked ahead. What should they do? He did not know what to do. Attack Shenzhen? Everyone knew that Murong and the others would not sit still and wait for death. So, do we do nothing? If they continue to stay in Primeval College, they might be ambushed again in the next moment. The black-clothed young man frowned. He did not care about the lives of these saints. To him, even if they all died, he would not feel the slightest bit of heartache. But what he cared about was his own future. If these people all died in the divine realm, even if he was not punished to death, he would have no future. Murong is too despicable. We might as well use even more experts to blow up the Sacred Mountain. Otherwise, if this continues, our numbers will continue to dwindle. Heaven walked over, seething with killing intent. The black-clothed young man's eyes flashed. Since that's the case, then let's destroy the Sacred Mountain. The black-clothed young man was enraged, and so were the other saints. Immediately, the remaining saints left Primeval College, seething with killing intent. They charged at Shenzhen, intending to kill Shenzhen in one fell swoop. But what's going on? That's all. When the black-clothed young man and the others arrived in front of Shenzhen, they were all shocked. That was because the Sacred Mountain that originally towered high in the sky had disappeared from their sight. It was as if it had disappeared. They took the Sacred Mountain? The saints were all given a fright. They all knew how big the Sacred Mountain was. How could a mere quasi-saint like Murong have taken it? He must have an enormous interspatial dimension on him, and it must be suitable for life. A cold light flashed through the black-clothed young man's eyes, but a hint of greed appeared on his face. Even his storage space couldn't store the Sacred Mountain in it. Of course, if he could compress and shrink the Sacred Mountain, it would be no problem. But was Murong strong enough to compress the Sacred Mountain? Impossible. That sort of interspatial dimension is extremely precious even in the divine realm. If I can kill Murong, the black-clothed young man chuckled coldly, already thinking of how to kill Murong. However, very suddenly, a trace of warning appeared in his heart. Defend! Immediately, the black-clothed young man roared. However, his quick reaction did not mean that the others were quick to react as well. When he roared, those saints didn't even have time to react. At that moment, a terrifying force appeared out of thin air. It was as if an ancient force had cut through time and space, exploding from the depths of the void and instantly drowning them. Rumble, the quasi-saint who bore the brunt of the attack, immediately exploded and died. After a portion of the powerhouses died, the other saints finally reacted and took a defensive stance. Chapter 1177. The Sacred Mountain disappeared into thin air, and the black-robed young man and the rest missed. This made the black-robed young man and the rest fly into a rage. However, just as they were enraged, Murong and the rest of Shenzhen's experts appeared stealthily again. A wave of terrifying power blasted down. The sages were still in shock. Moreover, they were here to attack the sacred mountain. Hence, they did not expect that someone would stab them in the back. When the power of Shenzhen's experts blasted down, they finally realized it. However, at this time, thousands or even tens of thousands of sages had been killed. However, even so, they did not see Murong Yu, not even one of Shenzhen's disciples. The power that came crashing down seemed to have rushed out of the void. This was, of course, because Murong Yu and the rest attacked directly from Hichu Luoshu. Once the power blasted out of Hichu Luoshu, he would immediately teleport away without caring about how many people he killed. In other words, after the power of Shenzhen's experts left Hichu Luoshu also disappeared. Even if the sacred sects reacted quickly, they would not be able to kill Murong Yu. This is so infuriating. The black-robed young man roared at the sky. The anger in his heart was about to burn him to ashes. He hated. He was furious. He was aggrieved. In fact, the black-robed young man was not the only one who was angry. The rest of the people were also furious and aggrieved. They were sages, but now they were being played by a god. How could they not feel aggrieved? Especially when they could not even touch the clothes of Murong Yu and the rest. On the other hand, their people kept dying. If this continued, it was only a matter of time before they were all devoured by Murong Yu. All of them were filled with murderous intent towards Murong Yu, but they could not do anything to Murong Yu. If they couldn't do anything to Shenzhen, they wouldn't be able to revive the eastern wilderness. Let's go to the demon desolate continent. The black-clothed youth roared angrily for a while before suddenly making a decision. To the celestial palace? Hong and the others were shocked. In the holy world, there were 3 superpowers: the human race, the demon race, and the holy race. The 3 races had always been in conflict. Although the human race and the monster race had temporarily joined forces to fight against the sacred race. However, it was only a temporary alliance. They were still enemies. If they went to the celestial palace to seek refuge with the demon race's experts, they wouldn't have the guts to kill them. However, a bout of ridicule was inevitable. Moreover, they were all arrogant people and would absolutely not be willing to rely on others, especially his enemies. If it wasn't for the fact that we didn't leave, Murong Yu and the others would have continued to ambush us. What will we use to resist? The black-clothed youth shouted in a deep voice. In reality, they still had a safest method that didn't require them to rely on the saints of the demon race, and that was to immediately return to the holy world. However, once they returned to the holy world, they wouldn't be far from death. The human race had spent so many resources to send them down. Could it be that they wanted them to take a stroll in the god realm? Hong and the others immediately fell silent. Now, only by joining forces with the demon race's experts could they have any hope of reviving Yang Huang. Otherwise, they would definitely die. Immediately, everyone headed towards the primeval college. There was a spatial wormhole that led to the demon desolate continent. On the way, the black-clothed youth and the others were all carefully guarding against Murong Yu's attacks. However, no matter how much they guarded, they couldn't guard against it. Streaks of terrifying power suddenly rushed out of the void and poured down. There were no signs, nor were there any people who appeared. However, it was precisely because of these people that kept appearing that the number of saints kept decreasing. In the end, they even became birds that were startled by the mere twang of a bough. As long as there were any strange movements, they would immediately be alerted and nervously attack. Just like that, when they returned to the primeval college, more than 10,000 saints had been killed. Watching as more than half of the saints died one after another, the remaining saints began to have thoughts of retreating. However, they didn't dare to return to the holy world, because they knew what was waiting for them in the holy world. A spatial wormhole. They're going to the demon desolate continent. Seeing the saints open a spatial wormhole, Xiang Sung Wu in the Hichu Luoshu world said with an ugly expression, The current 4 great academies only existed in name. This was because the saints no longer needed them and had left them to the side. For example, Xiang Sung Wu, the Bloody Butcher, and the others who had some relationship with Morong Yu had already joined Shengzhen's side. They weren't the saints' puppets. They didn't want the saints to revive Yang Huang and destroy the God Realm. A spatial wormhole. I wonder if we can destroy them? Morong Yu's eyes flashed with a cold light. If they could destroy the spatial wormhole when they entered, then they would all enter the spatial turbulence. The spatial turbulence of the God Realm couldn't kill them, but it could make them wander in the turbulent space forever. If the saints can't destroy the spatial wormhole, we can't either. Xiang Sung Wu shook his head. Although Morong Yu's idea was good, it wasn't practical. These bastards want to join forces with the saints of the demon race. It's said that the saints of the demon race are more than the saints of the human race. What should we do? Di Zhengye, a peak saint heavenly expert from the desolate world, said with a gloomy expression, "Kill our way over and kill the saints of the demon race. We'll kill as many of them as they come down." An expert said with a murderous look, "The saints of the human race and the demon race in the holy world are countless. How can we kill them all? If we push them too far, they'll probably massacre the entire God Realm. We can fight them for now, but if they want to massacre the entire God Realm, how can we stop them?" Hearing this, everyone fell silent. This was the problem that they were worried about. They could kill this batch, the second batch, or even the third batch. However, they weren't saints and couldn't fight against them. The other people in the God Realm were too weak. There weren't many quasi-saint in the God Realm. How could they fight against them? If only we could stop the saints from coming down. The fire-eyed golden ape, who had been silent all this while, suddenly said something shocking. Everyone sneered. Stop the saints from coming down? That was simply impossible. I'm just saying. The fire-eyed golden ape's face was red as he said uncomfortably. However, Morong Yu's heart skipped a beat. Then, his figure flashed and disappeared in front of everyone. Hichu, do you think it's possible to stop the saints from coming down? Morong Yu found Hichu and asked seriously. Yes. Hichu Luoshu didn't hesitate and said firmly. Really? Morong Yu was stunned. He was just asking casually and didn't have much hope. However, Hichu gave him a surprise. Without waiting for Hichu to answer, he asked again, how do we stop them? It's the same as the cultivation world and the immortal realm. As long as you get the recognition of the God Realm's origin energy and control the God Realm, you can set the rules so that the saints can't enter the God Realm. Morong Yu's eyes flashed. At the same time, he slapped his thigh. How could I forget about this? He now controlled the Yin Huang immortal realm. As long as he willed it, no one in the God Realm could enter the immortal realm. Similarly, if he controlled the God Realm, the saints couldn't enter, unless they destroyed the God Realm in the sacred world. Of course, whether or not they could destroy it was another matter. But how do we control the God Realm? Morong Yu's face was full of worry. The God Realm was definitely stronger than the immortal realm in every aspect. When Morong Yu got the recognition of the immortal realm's origin energy, it was because of the 36 cultivation worlds. When the origin energy of the 36 cultivation worlds joined together, it was reorganized into the Yin Huang immortal realm's origin energy. As a result, Morong Yu naturally controlled the Yin Huang immortal realm. Then, did the God Realm have to do the same? If that was the case, then Morong Yu would be in deep trouble. Because there were 3,000 immortal realms under the God Realm, and each immortal realm had 36 cultivation worlds. If he wanted to get the recognition of the immortal realm's origin energy, he had to get the recognition of the 36 cultivation worlds under the immortal realm. The origin energy of the 2,999 immortal realms and the origin energy of the 107,964 cultivation worlds. If he could control the God Realm after controlling these immortal realms, then it would be fine. If he couldn't, then it would be a waste of effort. However, did Morong Yu have a choice now? This was his only way to save the God Realm. Is there any other way? Morong Yu asked again, unwilling to give up. Hichu shook his head. If he wanted to stop the saints from descending, then he could only control the God Realm. After thinking about it, Muronyu entered the chaotic secret zone again. If you become a supreme or ruler, maybe you can. Liu Haozong's answer was even more direct. Murongyu's face darkened. If he had that strength, why would he need to set the rules in the God realm? He could just kill the humans and demons directly. He didn't believe that they would dare to defy him in the face of absolute power. Young man, you'd better hurry up and control the God realm. It's hard to get the recognition of 100,000 immortal realms. Liu Haozong patted Murongyu on the shoulder, gloating. Murongyu rolled his eyes, but he was also feeling depressed in his heart. Speaking of which, when did you become a savior? With your strength and current resources, you can protect your family, friends, and forces. Before Murongyu left, Liu Haozong suddenly asked. Murongyu paused, then said faintly, "The God realm is our hometown, our foundation. If the God realm is destroyed, so what if I protect them? He would become a wanderer without a home. Rather than that, it's better to fight now." Murongyu never thought of becoming a savior, and he has never been so great. But what he was doing now was such a great thing. He wanted to save the entire God realm, not only for himself, for his family and friends, for his forces, but also for the common people of the world. Chapter 1178. In the celestial palace of the demonic wilderness in the realm of the gods. My lord, there's a group of experts outside. They seem to be the sages of the human clan from the heaven realm. Inside the celestial palace, the sages of the demon clan were discussing Murongyu's feats in the past few days when a sage rushed in to report. What? Everyone was shocked when they heard this. Some even stood up and slammed the table. The human clan sages are coming for the celestial palace. Quick, stop them, a great sage said hurriedly. His expression changed. The sage who came in to report was confused. The human clan sages didn't seem to have any killing intent. Moreover, both sides were cooperating. Why would they stop them? Don't let them get close to the celestial palace. The undead realm expert in the celestial palace frowned and said with a gloomy expression. Although the sage who came in to report was still confused, he quickly left the celestial palace to stop the human clan sages. At this moment, the atmosphere in the celestial palace was tense. Everyone's expression was gloomy. What is Dongfang Qing trying to do? A great sage's expression was gloomy. His eyes flashed coldly. This bastard is probably afraid of Murongyu. That's why he brought the army of sages here to seek refuge. He wants to seek our protection. Another great sage said with a cold smile. His expression was malicious. Everyone's expression suddenly darkened. They were very clear about Murongyu's feats in the past few days. If Dongfang Qing and the others didn't return to the realm of the gods, they would definitely die. Bastard, they're trying to kill us, a sage said angrily. Originally, Murongyu's target was only Dongfang Qing and the others. However, if they were to get together with Dongfang Qing, Murongyu might attack them. They had been discussing this before. If Murongyu's target was them, what should they do? After a long discussion, they came to a conclusion they couldn't resist. My lord, we can't let Dongfang Qing and the other bastards get close. Everyone in the hall looked at the demon race's undead sage and said in a deep voice. However, before this important person could speak, a thunderous voice was heard. Lu Ling, is this how the demon clan treats their guests? We are allies. When this voice rang in the ears of everyone in the hall, a figure staggered in from outside. Sir, those people forced their way in. We couldn't stop them at all. Dongfang Qing, I'd like to see what he wants. Lu Ling, the demon clan's undying saint, was furious. As he spoke, he took a step forward and disappeared from the hall. The other experts also left the hall one after another. Outside the celestial palace. The celestial palace was not a palace, but the name of a power. Therefore, the celestial palace occupied an extremely large area, much larger than Primeval College. At this moment, hundreds of thousands of people were confronting each other with murderous intent. On one side was the experts from the demon clan, and on the other side was Dongfang Qing, the undying realm expert from the human clan. The black-robed young man led many human clan saints. Dongfang Qing, what do you mean by this? Lu Ling stepped forward and looked at Dongfang Qing indifferently. You must be afraid of Murong Yu and have come to seek protection. Aren't the human clan very noble? Haven't you always looked down on the demon clan? Why are you here today? Before Dongfang Qing could speak, a demon clan saint sneered. Swoosh! Instantly, the demon clan saints focused their attention on Dongfang Qing. At this moment, Dongfang Qing's face darkened and was extremely pale. Shut up, you have no right to speak here. No matter what, the human clan is our ally. As allies, we should help each other. However, the human race is much stronger than us. How can our frail bodies be of any help to him? Moreover, the human clan doesn't need our help at all. Lu Ling first scolded the saint, then looked at Dongfang Qing and said with a smile. Dongfang Qing's face darkened even more. On the surface, Lu Ling said that he wanted to help them. However, the meaning behind his words was obvious. Weren't the human clan very powerful? Why would they need their help? It was obvious that Lu Ling did not want to help them. You guys are too immoral. A saint from the human clan stepped forward and said angrily. Immoral? Lu Ling sneered. The other demon clan experts also sneered. All of them looked at Dongfang Qing and the others with disdain. Although the demon clan and the human clan had finally formed an alliance, everyone knew that it was only temporary. They were still enemies deep down. If they worked together to revive Huang and destroy the sacred clan, then the next thing that would happen would be a war between the two clans. It would be a war to the death. Dongfang Qing, you guys should go back. The Demon Wilderness Continent is not a place you should come to. Lu Ling looked at the ashen-faced Dongfang Qing and said calmly, "Ha ha!" Dongfang Qing suddenly laughed. Hearing Dongfang Qing's words, Lu Ling suddenly had a bad feeling. As expected, after laughing for a while, Dongfang Qing said coldly, "I've heard that the demon clan is despicable and shameless. They kick people when they're down and are arrogant beyond belief. Today, I've seen it for myself." The demon clan was instantly enraged. How could the demon clan be called despicable and shameless? In their battles with the human clan, they had already seen how despicable and shameless the human clan could be. How could they not be angry when Dongfang Qing put the blame on them? You're overthinking it. When did I say that I wanted the demon clan's help? We're just tired of the Eldritch continent and wanted to come here play. As he spoke, Dongfang Qing waved his hand. Immediately, the human clan saints tore apart the demon clan. They moved mountains, filled seas, shifted rivers. What are they doing? The demon clan saints looked at the human clan saints in shock. No one answered this question. There was no need to answer this question, because they could all see it. The human clan experts were building a city. With their strength, building a city was a piece of cake. Therefore, in less than 2 hours, a huge city appeared in front of everyone. It was right next to the Celestial Palace. These bastards still say that they're not looking for protection. They've already built a city right next to us. The demon clan members were about to die from anger. They all looked murderously at the human clan saints. They wanted nothing more than to kill these people. However, there were at least a few 100,000 human clan saints. If they fought, there would be a lot of casualties. They might even be blamed by the higher-ups. Good. Dongfang Qing, you're very good. Lu Ling looked at Dongfang Qing with an ashen face. Once again, he experienced Dongfang Qing's shamelessness. Everyone, we're all neighbors from now on. If that Murong Yu comes to kill us again, I hope that you won't just stand by and watch the fire burn across the river. Otherwise, you'll be implicated. Dongfang Qing laughed loudly. Before Lu Ling could say anything, he had already disappeared. Damn it, I'm so angry. These bastards are so shameless. I really hope that Murong Yu comes and kills them. One of the demon clan saints roared angrily. He was filled with murderous intent. If Murong Yu comes, we'll be in their attack range. Dongfang Qing is so shameless. The demon clan experts realized the seriousness of the problem and were all very unhappy. Sir, if Murong Yu really comes, should we intervene? One of them asked Lu Ling, "Do you think we could do nothing?" Lu Ling said helplessly. Although the demon clan and the human clan were separated by a wall, what was the difference between them and the human clan. Moreover, regardless of whether it was the human clan or the demon clan, their goal was to revive desolation. They were both Murong Yu's enemies. The reason why Murong Yu did not attack the demon clan saints was that he wanted to eliminate the human clan saints first. Once Dongfang Qing and the others were eliminated, they would attack the demon clan saints. Anyone with a discerning eye could see this. Pass down the order. If we encounter Murong Yu's sneak attack, we have to block him and rush into the celestial palace at the same time. Dongfang Qing ordered Hong and the others after they sat down in the newly built palace. Hong and the others' eyes shone with a strange light. They all felt that Dongfang Qing was too shameless. However, this was the only way to preserve their strength. Otherwise, they would only have two choices: return to the Holy Realm or be killed. When Dongfang Qing and the others arrived at the Demon Wilderness continent, Murong Yu had already left the chaotic secret ground. Next, I'll go and obtain the recognition of the Immortal Realm and the Immortal Realm's origins. I have to take control of the God Realm in the shortest time possible. Murong Yu thought. At the same time, he showed a hint of hesitation on his face. He had taken the Sacred Mountain, Shangzhen, and even the Ouyang clan and some of his allies into the Hichu Luo Shu. These people lived and cultivated there, absorbing and refining large amounts of heaven and earth yuan qi at every moment. Although Hichu Luo Shu did not lack heaven and earth yuan qi, there would be a day when it would dry up. After all, Hichu Luo Shu was not a real world. He was now hesitating whether he should let them all out. But where should he put them? The God Realm was definitely not suitable. The chaotic secret ground was also not suitable. The only place left was within the Eastern Wilderness. With Murong's pavilion looking after the Eastern Wilderness, there shouldn't be any problems. Moreover, even if Yang Huang was revived, Shangzhen's people would be able to keep their lives in the desolate world for now. After making the decision, Murong Yu immediately entered the desolate world. After informing everyone, Murong Yu moved the sacred mountain out of the He-Tu and the Book of the Luo and placed it in the desolate world. However, after entering the desolate world, Murong Yu separated the Shangzhen from the other factions. This was because the other factions were only allies. Wanting to join the Shangzhen, they had to go through the various tests of the Shangzhen before it was possible. Otherwise, they could only be allies forever. They would not be able to enjoy any treatment or benefits from a Shangzhen. Chapter 1179. After sending Shangzhen and Shangzhen's allies into the desolate world, Murong Yu left the desolate world again. Besides the Yin Huang Immortal Realm, there are still 2,999 Immortal Realms. Let's start with the Polar Light Immortal Realm. After returning to the Immortal Realm, Murong Yu decided on how to proceed. He was now a quasi-saint. Although he was only a Tier 1 quasi-saint, his strength was definitely not weaker than any peak Tier 10 quasi-saint, and he had many resources that were injured. Therefore, he effortlessly came to the Polar Light Immortal Realm from the Immortal Realm. Rumble. Somewhere in the sky of the Polar Light Immortal Realm, a figure suddenly stepped out of the void. As soon as he appeared, the space within a radius of hundreds of millions of miles around him began to collapse and be annihilated. Besides the void, the ground also began to crumble rapidly. Murong Yu looked helplessly at the crumbling sky and ground. He was extremely depressed. Sometimes, being strong was not necessarily a good thing. Just like him now, he was very strong and had even been sealed. Even so, the Polar Light Immortal Realm could not bear his existence. If he used all his strength, the entire Polar Light Immortal Realm would collapse. This was just his physical strength, and this was only the Immortal Realm. What if he reached the Immortal Realm? Before Murong, you could even get close to the Immortal Realm. The Immortal Realm would collapse and be annihilated. Murong Yu was worried. He could not even enter the Immortal Realm. How could he subdue the origin source? Seal. Seal. Murong Yu was a little depressed as he struck seals on his body, completely sealing his physical body and cultivation. Murong, you didn't know how many seals were placed on his body, but the space around him finally stopped trembling. Murong, you shook his head, took a step, and disappeared. There were 3,000 immortal realms in the immortal realm. Under each immortal realm, there were 36 immortal realms, which are the mortal realms. According to the experience of the Yanhuang immortal realm, as long as one controlled the origin source of the 36 immortal realms, one could directly control the immortal realm. Every immortal realm has an enforcer. As long as the enforcer is not dead, the origin source will not recognize a second person. Murong Yu thought to himself, if this was before he became an immortal, Murong Yu would definitely be stumped by this problem. Previously, he had subdued the 36 cultivation realms under the Yanhuang immortal realm because he had killed the enforcers. At the same time, he had refined the power source before it could escape. If this was before, Murong Yu would have had to kill those immortal realms of the immortal realm. But now Murong did not have to. Subduing the origin would subdued the immortal world. With his absolute strength. Come! Rumble. As soon as he appeared, the sky and earth began to crumble rapidly, just like when he appeared in the immortal realm. Murong Yu heaved a sigh of relief. Although the sky and earth were crumbling, the immortal realm could still withstand him. As he breathed a sigh of relief, Murong Yu stretched out his hand and made a grabbing motion towards the 9 heavens. Rumble. The moment Murong Yu made his move, the entire immortal realm shook rapidly. Countless lives were shrouded in a sense of death and fear. At this moment, everyone in the cultivation world was taken aback, because they were shocked to find that the feeling of death and fear had suddenly appeared in their hearts. Those were not their own feelings, but the feelings of someone else. It was as though they were being controlled by someone else, and their fear came from the existence that controlled them. This was the fear of the origin source of the immortal realm, because ever since Murong Yu appeared, it felt that Murong Yu was coming for it. Therefore, when it saw Murong Yu's big hand breaking through the air, it felt fear. However, it had nowhere to run, and because it was the true ruler of the immortal realm, its emotions spread throughout the immortal realm while it was terrified, directly affecting all lives in this world. Submit or be annihilated. Although Murong Yu suppressed and sealed his power, his strength was still very tyrannical. The big hand directly swept through countless space-time and appeared in the origin source of the immortal realm. Then it grabbed the trembling origin source and pulled it in front of its eyes. I'm willing to submit. Sensing Murong Yu's strength, the origin source immediately chose to submit, because it could feel Murong Yu's killing intent. If it dared to answer with half a word of no, it would be crushed to death. At the same time, the source force immediately took back the power that was attached to the enforcer. At the same time, the enforcer who had lost the origin source let out a scream, but it did not know what was going on. Very good. Murong Yu nodded, and then immediately refined the origin source. This was the benefit of being powerful. If it was before, the origin source would not have cared about him at all. Moreover, he could not even see the origin source. After refining the origin source, Murong Yu had already controlled the immortal realm. And now, even if he exploded with his strongest power, the immortal realm would not be destroyed, because the immortal realm had become a part of Murong Yu. No matter how powerful he would not hurt any part of his body. It was because of this that Murong Yu could freely enter and exit the Yanhuang immortal realm and the immortal realm of Huaxia. If that's the case, I might as well do it here. Just as Murong Yu was about to leave, his heart skipped a beat. The distance between the 36 immortal realms of the immortal realm was extremely far. Of course, this was for the immortals of the immortal realm. But for Murong Yu, a quasi-saint, this distance was nothing at all. Therefore, he decided to make his move in this immortal realm. Rumble. After Murong Yu made his decision, he immediately made his move. 2 big hands reached out and directly pierced the barrier of the immortal realm he was in. Then they went straight into the other two immortal realms and into the origin source space of the two immortal realms. Then, before the two origin sources could react, they were caught in front of him. Submit or die. Murong-Yu didn't say anything else, only uttering these 5 words. There was no hesitation at all. The two origin sources of the immortal realms submitted. If they did not submit, they would die. Moreover, they knew that even if they were unwilling, Murong-Yu could forcibly refine them. But before that, Murong-Yu still asked them about it. This was a show of respect. But what puzzled them was that Murong-Yu was so strong. Why did he want to subdue them? There was no answer to this question. Murong-Yu could not be bothered to waste time explaining it to them. The big hands continued to reach out, and the origin sources of the immortal realms were constantly grabbed by him. Then they submitted and were refined. 36 immortal realms were not a lot. Soon, Murong-Yu had subdued and refined all the origin sources of the 36 immortal realms. Just as Murong-Yu had expected, when the origin sources of the 36 immortal realms were refined and absorbed into his body, the origin sources of the 36 immortal realms automatically began to merge. Just like the origin sources of the 36 immortal realms of the Yin Huang immortal realm. Under Murong-Yu's active urging, the origin sources of the 36 immortal realms of the polar light immortal realm were completely merged in less than 2 hours. After the merger, the origin sources of the 36 immortal realms completely disappeared and became a brand new origin sources. The origin sources of the polar light immortal realm. It really works. Murong-Yu's face lit up with joy. Just now, when the origin sources of the polar light immortal realm were formed, Murong-Yu felt that his mind was already connected to the polar light immortal realm. After the Yin Huang immortal realm, the polar light immortal realm became the second immortal realm that Murong-Yu controlled. Purple sea immortal realm, mirage light immortal realm, sky-shattering immortal realm. After subduing the polar light immortal realm, Murong-Yu continued without rest. Immortal realms were subdued one after another. At this time, the sages in the immortal realm issued orders again. Demon Desolate Continent, Celestial Palace. Dongfang Qing, what do you think? Lu Ling sat on the main seat, looking at Dongfang Qing with a dark expression. What do you mean, what to do? You still don't want to carry out the orders? Dongfang Qing sat lazily on the chair and said mildly. Lu Ling frowned slightly, feeling a little unhappy. Now Murong-Yu and Shengzhen have disappeared. Perhaps they are hatching some scheme. If you don't want to end up like me, we have to work together and revive the Yang Huang immortal realm as soon as possible. Dongfang Qing said mildly, but his eyes flashed coldly. In that case, carry out the orders immediately. The 4 great continents of the human race are in your hands. We will be in charge of the Demon Desolate Continent. Remember, within 100 years, most of the people in the immortal realm must enter the Yang Huang immortal realm. Otherwise, we can forget about ever returning to the sacred world. Dongfang Qing's face darkened. He was now afraid of Murong-Yu. And even if they were sages, they had no prestige in the immortal realm. Trying to trick all the major factions into the Yang Huang immortal realm, that was simply impossible. But if they did not enter the Yang Huang immortal realm, it would be useless to kill them elsewhere. As the saying goes, there's strength in numbers. I think we should work together. Dongfang Qing's eyes flashed, and he said with a smile, shameless. Lu Ling cursed in his heart, but he did not reject Dongfang Qing, because it was indeed the best time to work together. Send the orders immediately. All the demon factions and experts must enter the Yang Huang immortal realm. Violators will be killed. Lu Ling's murderous order was sent out. The sages were finally going to act. Chapter 1180. The combined strength of the human and demon race experts in the sacred world amounted to more than 1,000,000 saint experts. Therefore, when they joined forces, the Demon Desolate Continent and the other continents immediately went into chaos. All of them were going to the Sun Desolate Continent. What was going on? When they received this order, the various forces and experts of the demon race were stunned. At this moment, many people thought of the purpose of the saints. Could it be that they wanted to drive all the people of the god realm to the sun-desolate continent and then sacrifice them? Thinking of this possibility, everyone in the demon race panicked. No one was willing to enter the sun-desolate continent because they didn't want to die. However, their reaction was within the expectations of Lu Ling, Dongfang Qing, and the others. Therefore, when the order was given, the saints took action. The demon race and human race saints worked together. The army of hundreds of thousands of saints immediately uprooted some of the demon race's super forces. Not a single one was left. Blood flowed like a river, and corpses were everywhere. And this was only the beginning. The saint army began to move in the demon-desolate continent. Those who did not immediately head to the sun-desolate continent after receiving the order were all killed. Finally, under the bloody suppression of the saints, the demon race experts began to enter the sun-desolate continent through the teleportation array set up by the saints. After entering the sun-desolate continent, they realized that the saints did not kill them at all. However, they also realized that those teleportation arrays were one way. In other words, they could only enter the sun-desolate continent and could not leave, unless they found some wormholes or built a teleportation array. However, whether it was a wormhole or a teleportation array, it was not something that could be completed in a short period of time. Of course, if they were lucky, they could find a wormhole. However, it was impossible to build a teleportation array because the construction of a teleportation array needed to communicate with both sides. And since they could not leave the sun-desolate continent, they could not communicate with the other side of the teleportation array. The demon race experts began to panic. They all knew that if the saints really wanted to revive Huang, they would be sacrificed. As for why they were not sacrificed, obviously, it was because there were not enough people. However, as more and more experts came in every day, there would be enough people one day. Damn it, the demon race of a sacred world wants to sacrifice us. We would rather die than submit. Finally, someone in the demon race began to resist. However, the sages reacted extremely quickly. These forces had just started to resist, but before they could do anything, they were all wiped out. However, with the first, there would be a second. One by one, the forces began to rise up and fight against the sages. However, how could they be a match for a saint? Wherever the saint passed, all forces that resisted were killed. The sages' bloody methods did not intimidate the demons. On the contrary, under their heavy pressure, more and more forces began to resist. In the end, it led to the resistance of the entire demon-desolate continent and the other continents. Celestial Palace. Mother asterisk Kerr. These ants are simply overturning the heavens. How dare they go against us? They deserve to die. Dongfang Qing's face was ashen as he spoke with a murderous look. Their goal was to drive everyone into the Yang desolate continent and use them as a blood sacrifice to revive the Yang desolate. And if he wanted to revive Yang Huang, he needed enough people as blood sacrifices. Therefore, when everyone in the demon desolate continent rebelled, they did not retreat. Their strength was indeed powerful. If they were to mobilize, it would be enough to wipe out the entire demon race. However, they did not dare and could not do so. Once they killed all the demon race, what if they did not have enough people to revive Yang Huang? Weren't there still humans? The humans were not idiots. They had long known about what had happened to the demon race. If their orders were to appear on the human continent, no one would be willing to enter the Yang desolate continent. Lu Ling's face was as gloomy as water. We have to think of a way to drive all these people into the Yang desolate continent. The higher-ups did not give us much time. If we are unable to complete this mission within the time limit, I'm afraid we will all be sacrificed. Dongfang Qing's face darkened, but he did not flare up, because what Lu Ling said was the truth. However, how could they drive all those people into the Yang desolate continent? Why don't we drive all the humans in first? As long as we drive a portion of them in, it should be enough. Dongfang Qing suggested, I'll lend you all my men. Why don't you try driving them in? Lu Ling looked at Dongfang Qing indifferently, but he was extremely depressed in his heart. Dongfang Qing was furious. Then what should we do? We can't just wait here for death, right? Lu Ling chuckled. Don't we have more than 1,000,000 sages? If we split up and go to those low-level continents, we could just take all of them away. Sages were sages, after all. Even if their realms were sealed, they still had abilities that were more powerful than gods. In fact, not to mention sages, even quasi-saint could take away those gods who were not that powerful. Of course, they also needed some storage space treasures that had a larger space. Moreover, if they split up and went to other continents, those continents would not even have a quasi-saint, so no one would be a match for them. That's a good idea. However, let's deal with the storage treasures first. Dongfang Qing's eyes flashed coldly. Immediately, orders were passed down one after another. Instantly, the sages began to refine the treasures. They were refining space treasures that could store living people. Space treasures, especially those that could store living people and had to have a large space. Even in the realm of the gods, they were extremely rare. Even sages could not refine them. However, what they were going to refine now was only a temporary treasure. This way, it would be much easier. Every sage could refine them. Moreover, they were now dominating the world. With a single order, they could gather all kinds of resources from countless forces. One by one, they refined space treasures that had a large space. Every sage had at least 2 or 3 of these space treasures. Then, these sages left the demonic wilderness continent with these space treasures and went to other low-level continents. The eternal wilderness continent was a second-level continent within the demon race. It was extremely vast. The number of demon race experts was as numerous as the sand in the Ganges. However, these demon race experts were not very powerful. On this day, the originally bright sky suddenly turned dark. It was so dark that one could not even see their own fingers. Many demon race experts were shocked. They did not know what was going on. However, at this moment, an extremely powerful suction force suddenly descended from the sky. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. One by one, the sages who had yet to react were sucked up. They did not even have time to react. Following that, waves of angry roars, exclamations, and cries could be heard. In less than half a day, the entire eternal wilderness continent gradually quieted down. At the same time, the sky returned to daylight. High up in the sky of the eternal wilderness continent, a demon race sage reached out his hand and grabbed a picture scroll. Mission complete. Go to the next continent. The demon race sage smiled faintly. Then, he took a step forward and disappeared into the endless depths of space. At the same time that countless demon race experts were being taken away from the eternal wilderness continent, the same thing was happening in the countless continents within the demon race. One by one, the demon race experts were being taken away. One by one, the prosperous demon race continents became barren lands. The sages' space treasures were gradually filled to the brim. Once they could no longer hold any more lives, they stopped capturing sages and threw them all into the Yang Wilderness Continent. Gradually, the number of people in the Yang Wilderness Continent increased. Meanwhile, the continents within the demon race's territory quickly became uninhabited. In the end, other than the demon wilderness continent and the higher-level continents, all the people in the other continents were taken away. These lowly ants are truly despicable. Only then would they be willing to enter the Yang Wilderness Continent. In the Celestial Palace, Dongfang Qing sneered. If they had known that this would happen, they would have done so earlier. Now, we should have enough people, right? Dongfang Qing looked at the silent Lu Ling. Lu Ling shook his head. They had never revived Huang before. How would they know if it was enough? To be safe, throw those people from the lower-level continents into the Yang Wilderness Continent. Then, we'll use them as a blood sacrifice. Lu Ling grinned maliciously. However, his eyes shone with a cold light. Dongfang Qing nodded. Immediately, the sages moved out again and charged towards the human continents. In the human world, other than the 4 great continents, the strongest people in the other continents were only heavenly emperors. There were more continents like the primordial continent and the dream wilderness continent than the demon race. Faced with the sage's capture, they were captured before they could even react. In an instant, the entire god realm was in chaos. The lower-level continents were slightly better. Even if they were captured, they did not know what was going on. The ones who were the most frightened were the people from the 4 great continents. They knew that the sages had taken action. Faced with the sages, if it were not for Shenzhen and the other quasi-saint experts, they would not have been able to defend themselves. Moreover, Shenzhen and Murong Yu had disappeared into thin air. This made them even more anxious. Unknowingly, they had already regarded Murong Yu and Shenzhen as their pillars of support and saviors. They had already started to rely on Shenzhen from the bottom of their hearts. Damn it! Are Shenzhen and the rest dead? Why don't I see anyone coming out to fight against the sages? Murong, you must be a coward. That bastard is just going to let the sages bully us gods? Seeing that the sage was unscrupulously collecting deities, some of the frightened people even began to complain about Murong Yu. However, they did not expect that when Murong Yu wanted to form an alliance to fight against the sages, how many forces had chosen to follow him? How many forces were on his side? In fact, when Shenzhen was fighting against the sages, those sages were just watching from the sidelines. Now that Murong Yu did not appear, they were blaming him? Did they treat Shenzhen as their guardian? Chapter 1181. No matter how much these people grumbled, Murong Yu and Shenzhen did not appear in the end. In fact, in the beginning, those saints were a little worried when they were capturing gods in the various continents, because they were worried that they would be targeted by Murong Yu. When they were gathered together, they were unable to deal with Murong Yu and Shenzhen's sneak attacks, let alone now that they were separated. Therefore, everyone was very careful when they were trying to capture a deity. They were prepared to escape at any time. However, as they continued to capture gods, Murong Yu and Shenzhen did not appear. Their anxious hearts were finally at ease. In the end, they were even more unrestrained. As a result, even more people were captured and sent to the Yanghuang continent. However, the saints did not capture gods in the 4 continents. Therefore, in the end, countless people rushed to the 4 continents. And the people of the 4 continents were also in a state of panic. And Murong Yu did not know all of this, because at this moment, he was crazily refining the cultivation world and immortal world, trying to control the god world before the saints destroyed it. However, what he did not know was that if the saints captured enough people in the Yanghuang continent and sacrificed them, the Yanghuang would be revived. At that time, even if Murong Yu controlled the god world, he would not be able to stop the Yanghuang from destroying the god world. However, Murong Yu did not consider that the saints would do this. Moreover, even if he had considered it, he could not stop them now, because even if he killed all the saints in the god world, would the saints not come down? As long as they did not give up on reviving Huang, there would still be saints coming down. Don't look at how Murong Yu's previous sneak attacks did not cause any casualties to Shenzhen. But could he maintain 0 casualties? As long as there were casualties, there would be one less quasi-saint who died. And the saints were as numerous as the sand in the Ganges River. It was impossible to fight with them. Therefore, the best way was to control the god world and stop the saints from descending. However, could Murong Yu really control the god world? Could he control the god realm before Yanghuang was revived? At this point, Murong Yu had taken control of 1,000 immortal realms. There were still 1,999 immortal realms waiting for him to take control. Therefore, he did not relax. Instead, he used an even faster speed to refine the origin of the cultivation world. At this moment in the divine realm, those saints who were originally wantonly capturing deities had already stopped. All of them had gathered on the Yanghuang continent. Lu Ling, can we begin? Dong Fangqing looked at Lu Ling and asked expressionlessly, as long as we sacrifice these people, we should be able to revive Yanghuang. Lu Ling looked at the Yanghuang mainland beneath his feet and said emotionlessly with an indifferent expression, "That's right. To them, anyone below the saint realm is just an ant. Who would still have feelings after trampling an ant to death? Still not enough? Dongfang Qing's eyes flashed with a cold glint, and he continued. Apart from the larger continents, almost all the lower continents have been wiped out. If these people are not enough, we can only go to the large continents to capture them. Besides, we don't have much time left. The time given by the higher-ups was almost up. If they were unable to revive Yang Huang within the time limit, they would die. We don't have much time left. I hope these people can revive Yang Huang. Otherwise, it will be our doomsday. Lu Ling said emotionlessly, and his eyes flashed with a cold glint. Blood sacrifice, Dongfang Qing roared. Instantly, over 1 million saints not far away from them burst forth with their most powerful powers at the same time, striking out one seal after another into the distance. In the end, they landed in all directions of the Sun Wilderness continent. Rumble. As the seals were thrown out, the entire Yang desolate continent suddenly erupted with divine light that soared into the sky. Waves of terrifying aura burst out in all directions, instantly enveloping the entire Yang desolate continent. Waves of power exploded from the ground like a flood. It seemed that a super formation had been set up on the Yang Huang mainland, and the seals that the saints sent out earlier had activated this formation. Following the activation of the formation's power began to explode. Instantly, the countless gods that had been captured by the saints to the Yang Huang mainland began to be crushed, destroyed, and annihilated by the formation's power. In the blink of an eye, hundreds of millions of deities were killed or injured on the Yang Huang continent. Blood flowed like a river, and corpses were everywhere. Blood splattered into the sky, and the thick smell of blood covered the entire Yang Huang mainland. At this moment, everyone on the Yang Huang mainland panicked. One by one, they began to flee in all directions, wanting to escape the Yang Huang mainland. However, there was no transportation formation for them to leave the Yang Huang mainland. And in such a short time, they had not found a wormhole. So where could they escape to? The deity ocean. Some people rushed towards the deity ocean outside the mainland. Although the deity ocean was incomparably dangerous, it was better than waiting for death here. However, if they could think of it, why didn't the saints think of it? When those people rushed to the edge of the Yang Huang mainland, they were horrified to find that a spatial barrier had appeared at the edge of the mainland. The deity ocean was right in front of them, but they could not rush out. In an instant, everyone was enraged and began to attack the barrier. However, it was all in vain. At this moment, the entire Yang Huang mainland was enveloped by the super formation. Waves of power swept out continuously, suppressing everything. Whether it was in the center of the Yang Huang mainland or at the edge of the Yang Huang mainland, they could not resist the killing of the super formation. Trillions of people were killed one after another. Immediately, other than the blood that kept flowing out and the choking smell of blood, there was also a wave of murderous aura and resentment. In the beginning, the rivers of blood only flowed on the surface of the Yang Huang mainland. The murderous aura and resentment soared into the sky and floated above the Yang Huang mainland. However, at some point, the blood that was flowing on the ground slowly seeped into the depths of the mainland. In fact, there were some places where there was not even a trace of blood. It was as if there had never been any blood. Moreover, there seemed to be an inexplicable power deep in the ground that enveloped the sky above the mainland. It kept absorbing the murderous aura and resentment. It's working. The Yang Huang mainland is absorbing the blood and the murderous aura and resentment. In the sky, Dongfang Qing smiled. I hope we can successfully revive the eastern wilderness this time. Otherwise, we'll definitely die, Lu Ling said calmly. However, an inexplicable sense of danger appeared in his heart. He felt that something was wrong. Immediately, he glanced at Dongfang Qing. Could it be that this bastard is plotting something? Thinking of this, he secretly increased his power to the maximum. If Dongfang Qing did anything, he could immediately counterattack. Rumble, as the gods continued to kill, their blood, murderous aura, and resentment were absorbed the moment they appeared. At the same time, waves of murderous aura that was different from theirs began to emanate from the ground. Gradually, Dongfang Qing and the others saw the sky above the Yanghuang mainland turn from blue to gray. Murderous aura. It was exactly the same as the murderous aura in the Yanghuang mainland. Moreover, the murderous aura was getting stronger and stronger. Dongfang Qing and the others were overjoyed. This murderous aura was unique to the Yanghuang mainland. Now that the murderous aura was getting stronger and stronger, it meant that the Yanghuang mainland was gradually recovering its life force. In the eastern wilderness, Murong Xian was cultivating with the blood crystal flower an undying blood soul that Murong Yu had given to him. All of a sudden, he opened his eyes, because at that moment, he suddenly felt an extremely powerful and familiar aura. The Yanghuang mainland's aura. Murong Xian immediately reacted. Because he had received the eastern wilderness's inheritance, he was very familiar with the Yanghuang mainland's aura. Not only was the aura getting stronger and stronger, but its life force was also getting stronger. The Yanghuang mainland has been revived. Murong Xian's expression changed drastically. With a thought, he disappeared from the eastern wilderness world. When he reappeared, he was already in the eastern wilderness. Did they really revive the Yanghuang mainland? Floating in the sky above the eastern wilderness, Murong Xian looked in the direction of the Yanghuang mainland. His expression darkened, because he felt that the Yanghuang mainland's aura was rapidly growing stronger. It was likely that the Yanghuang mainland would be revived soon. What should we do? Murong Xian panicked. He wanted to stop the Yanghuang mainland from reviving. However, he knew that it was impossible. How could he stop it with his strength? I hope Father returns soon. I hope he can stop all of this. Now, I can only do my best to protect the eastern wilderness. Murong Xian pondered for a while. In the end, he did not try to stop the revival of the Yanghuang mainland. Instead, he returned to the eastern wilderness to make preparations. Yanghuang mainland. Feeling the increasingly dense, murderous aura and powerful life force, all the saints smiled. Because at this moment, less than half of the people had been killed by the formation. And it was clear that just half of the people were about to revive the Yanghuang mainland. Everyone, once the Yanghuang revives, we will immediately remove the seal in our bodies and return to the holy world. Dongfang Qing's voice spread far and wide. Everyone agreed loudly. Because if they did not return to the holy world in time, they might be killed by the Yanghuang mainland. But why did they not return now? Because they could not be sure if the Yanghuang had really revived. If something happened, they would only die even if they returned to the holy world. Seeing that the Yanghuang was about to revive, could Murong Yu really turn the tide and save the God world? Chapter 1182. Boom. Suddenly, the entire God realm seemed to explode. Heaven and earth shook. At the same time, whether it was Murong Xian and the others in the desolate world or the gods of the various continents in the God realm, they all felt the strong tremors. Many people were even sent flying by the tremors. The tremors didn't come from the ground. Instead, it came from a certain location. The void shattered and the mountains collapsed. Could it be that the God realm is about to collapse? At this moment, countless people's faces changed. They were terrified. What's going on? In a certain immortal world, Murong Yu had just grabbed the origin energy of a cultivation world and was about to refine it when he suddenly felt the immortal world he was in, as well as the immortal worlds he had once controlled, violently trembled. It was as if these immortal worlds had been attacked by someone from afar. Even the cultivation world's origin energy that Murong Yu had just grabbed was almost sent flying by the impact. Fortunately, he reacted quickly and didn't let the origin energy escape. Then Yanghuang has been revived? Murong Yu's face changed. He recalled the scene of Murong Xian refining the eastern wasteland to death. At that time, the entire God realm was shaken. At that time, Yanghuang was just struggling before death. How many times stronger was this tremor than before? It was possible that it was billions of times stronger. While Murong Yu was guessing, a terrifying, baleful aura came from afar and quickly covered the entire god realm. In just an instant, the entire god realm's sky turned gray. Energy lingered and baleful aura filled the sky. It was a scene of doomsday. People in the god realm knew nothing about this. They only felt that the end of the world was coming. Many people guessed that perhaps the sage had revived Yang Huang. Yu, who had already controlled more than 2,000 immortal worlds, was shocked to find that the terrifying, baleful aura had already seeped into the immortal world from the god realm. Then, it gradually seeped into the cultivation world from the immortal world. One must know that this was not the god realm, but the immortal realm and the cultivation world, which were many times weaker than the god realm. In the divine world, the baleful aura might not be able to directly kill a deity. With their strength, they could barely resist the onslaught of the baleful aura. However, it was also impossible to directly absorb the yuan qi of heaven and earth to cultivate. This was because the heaven and earth primordial qi contained killing intent. However, when the baleful qi reached the immortal world and the cultivation world, it would be extremely dangerous. Especially in the cultivation world, it was even more terrifying. Even if the baleful aura here was far less concentrated than the baleful aura in the divine world. However, once the baleful aura entered the immortal world, many immortals could not withstand it and were directly killed by the baleful aura. The immortals who were in the midst of cultivation absorbed the baleful aura without realizing it. Therefore, these people didn't even know what was going on before their bodies exploded and died. Of course, not all of them would die. This was because there were still experts among them. The moment they realized that something was wrong, they immediately expelled the baleful aura. However, the strength of the entire immortal realm wasn't high to begin with, and weak people could be found everywhere. Therefore, once the baleful aura entered, these people were met with tragedy. The baleful aura that infiltrated the cultivation world was much weaker than the immortal world. However, there were more casualties in the cultivation world. This was because the cultivation world was a mortal world. There were many people who weren't even in the cultivation world. Seeing this, Yu was immediately enraged. Immediately, he closed the immortal world and cultivation world that he had already controlled. Under his control, the power of the entire immortal world and cultivation world was mobilized by him to resist the invasion of the baleful aura. In the end, Yu directly borrowed the power of the immortals and cultivation world's cultivators. Although the immortals and cultivation world's individual strength wasn't strong, when the power of the entire immortal world and cultivation world was gathered together, they were much stronger than an ordinary quasi-saint. Therefore, the baleful aura was easily blocked. After blocking the infiltration of the baleful aura, Yu began to clean up the baleful aura that had already infiltrated. In the end, although there were many casualties in the immortal world, it wasn't too serious. As for the immortal world that wasn't under Yu's control, although Yu saw it, he could imagine it. Those immortal worlds must have suffered heavy casualties. Moreover, this was only the beginning. If Huang really revived, then the baleful aura would be even denser, and who knew how long it would last. After taking control of the immortal world and cultivation world, Yu increased the speed of refining the immortal world and cultivation world's origin energy, although he really wanted to go to the immortal world to investigate. So what if he knew that Yang Huang had revived? This was already the truth, and he didn't have the strength to kill Yang Huang. Therefore, he had to quickly take control of the immortal world to protect it. This was the only way. Then, did Yang Huang really revive? Yes. After Dongfang Qing and the others sacrificed 60 to 70% of the people in the Yang Huang mainland, Yang Huang was finally revived. At the same time that the immortal world was shaken up, Yang Huang mainland. With a loud bang, Dongfang Qing and the others immediately felt a terrifying force surging up from the ground. Immediately, the deities who were already on the Yangwang continent were turned into clouds of blood mist at the same time. They were directly killed. Even many of the saints in the sky were shattered by the impact. The sage's expressions changed. Yang Huang has revived. Release the seal and return to the immortal world. Dongfang Qing immediately shouted and was the first to release the seal on his body. Immediately, an extremely powerful force wrapped around his body and pulled him back to the immortal world. During this process, more than 1,000,000 sages also released their seals and were about to ascend back to the immortal world. However, at this moment, many sages felt an inexplicable sense of danger. They even had the thought of not being able to return to the immortal world. However, the first person to release his seal had already flown high into the sky and was about to be pulled back to the immortal world. Roar! However, at this moment, a thunderous roar came from beneath their feet. Bang! 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 Those sages who had already released their seals and recovered their peak strength did not have any time to react to this roar. Their entire bodies exploded along with their souls. They could not be any more dead. With just a roar, more than 90% of the 1,000,000 sages exploded and died. In the end, only 100,000 sages were left. Among these 100,000 sages, all of them were injured. Even the strongest ones, Dongfang Qing and Lu Ling, who had reached the undying realm, were injured. Immediately, these sages' expressions changed drastically, and they could not wait to rush back to the immortal world. Swoosh! Just as they were feeling horrified, a huge blood-red hand that was condensed from power had already charged out from the ground. It passed through the endless space-time and shattered millions upon millions of heavens as it grabbed out. It's over, it's over. The remaining sages were filled with intense fear and the aura of death. At this moment, Lu Ling finally realized why he felt that something was amiss earlier. It was not that Dongfang Qing was plotting against them, but Yang Huang. With a swoosh, the huge blood-red hand quickly grabbed at them. Immediately, everyone, including Dongfang Qing and Lu Ling, could not escape as they were grabbed by the huge blood-red hand. Then, just as they were panicking, the huge blood-red hand had already squeezed. Bang! 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 One by one, the saints were crushed, including Dongfang Qing and Lu Ling. There was no way for them to escape or even resist. More than 1,000,000 sages, including great sages and undying realm experts, died. The sky was immediately covered by layers of black blood clouds. However, these blood clouds did not appear for long before they were dispersed by Yang Huang's ferocious aura. Even the blood clouds could be destroyed. One could only imagine how terrifying Yang Huang's power was. Whoosh! All of a sudden, a powerful suction force came from the ground as if it was exhaling. Immediately, the blood clouds, blood rain, and even the blood-red lightning were all absorbed and disappeared from the Yang Huang mainland. They seemed to have been absorbed by Yang Huang. Rumble! After absorbing these forces, the entire Yang Huang mainland began to shake violently. Waves of extremely powerful forces continued to erupt from the depths of the Yang Huang mainland. Everywhere it passed, mountains, rivers, oceans, and even the ground were quickly shaken into dust. Roar! After a shocking roar, the Yang Huang mainland, which was originally floating in the deity ocean, suddenly rose into the sky. It continued to shake in the void, and gradually, a gigantic creature appeared in the sky. If Murongyu was here, he would definitely recognize that this gigantic creature was the blood fiends in the Huang world. It was obvious that the blood fiends had the same appearance as Yang Huang, but Yang Huang's body was billions of times larger than the blood fiends. Moreover, the difference in strength between the two sides was too great. They were not on the same level. Those blood fiends were probably just parasites in Yang Huang's blood. An extremely terrifying and ferocious aura continued to erupt, shocking the entire God realm, and even the immortal realm and the cultivation realm. Holy realm, human race, and demon race. Yang Huang has finally revived. When they saw Yang Huang rise into the sky, the sages of the demon race and human race were instantly excited. As for the fallen sages and gods, to them, those people were nothing but ants. Moreover, to successfully revive Yang Huang, some sacrifices were necessary. Begin to control Yang Huang. The human race and demon race experts prepared to control Yang Huang and use it to deal with the sacred race. At this time, Yang Huang had already set its sights on the continent closest to it. You're tuning into the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.